Welcome to the Long Take Review, a film podcast with one eye always on the Oscar race. I'm your host, Jen Sobchak Bankard, and I'm here with two fellow Oscar nerds. First, he's our resident Oscar historian, and I look forward to his maybe brief recap of Diane Warren's career later. It's PT McNiff. How's it going, PT?
Like Diane, I'm feeling flaming hot. I'm ready to go, ready to talk about our final predictions.
You got the fire inside. I love it. And he's the one who started it all this time last year when he asked me if he wanted to co-write an Oscar predictions article. It's Antonio Elefano. Antonio, how does it feel to be the originator of the Long Take Review?
Yeah, no, it feels amazing. I can't believe it's been like a year.
You know,
but,
right?
Like, so our listeners know and understand, like, this started because like Jen and I sometimes take a shuttle from Union Station together to work at USC. And I always love, like, sometimes I see colleagues and I'm like, maybe I'll just pretend.
Some of them listen to this, Antonio. I don't know if you should be saying that.
Straight up.
Because then they're going to wonder, is it me?
Antonio secrets.
Tell all.
But with Jen, I'm always happy. I always just want to chat, right? Like we always like talked about pop culture and movies and stuff. And I was reading your Substack and I was reading your stuff and I remember like I'm gonna write Jen a proposal just for like doing this Oscar articles because I always wanted to do one. And you're so nice. I was so worried that I was like pressuring you to do something that you didn't want to do. So I was like, I was going to be very careful. And you were so nice and you said like, yeah, we can do that. And then on the day that we were trying to figure out the logistics of how we were going to write it, you texted to say like, oh, can we do a podcast instead? And I think I wrote something like, oh, maybe, but
Yeah,
secretly, like I was freaking out.
Yes.
Because I'll be honest, like I'd never listened to a podcast like before, like that day, and also like dating back to like kids being mean in grade school, I was always very self-conscious of like my voice, and I was always really quiet in like grade school, and never like I was okay as a public speaker, but I was always like ultra prepared. So the idea of like riffing for like 2 hours was just like terrifying. It was so scary, and but in the end, what I realized was that I loved talking to you and PT and Greg more than I hated the sound of my voice. And that's the thing I didn't know until you all made me realize it. So I think PT said this was like around our 50th like episode. And that's the lion's share of that is obviously you. Like I show up like for less than a quarter of these and just for like art house films and the Oscars. But like I've loved every minute. So happy anniversary.
Aww.
And yeah, this is great. This is wonderful.
Amazing.
So,
well, I didn't know. Well, first of all, like your reluctance to record that first episode was not really a secret. I could sense. I was reading between the lines. But when we actually did it, like I wouldn't have known that you were anxious about it at all. I feel like it was very natural, and I think that's why we're here today, is because it just kind of worked out and like clicked, and we kept going. So, PT, can you confirm? You're the one who did the episode count? Is this number 50?
This is number 49. The Oscars reaction episode will be number 50.
Oh, exciting!
Wow.
So we're very close. But because Antonio potentially, it sounds like, will not be able to be on the Oscars reaction episode. It's very well and fair for him to say happy anniversary now, because we will be celebrating next time and have to invite him back. And maybe we can get him on some blockbuster movies that he's into if he wants to down the road.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, if it hasn't become apparent, we're here because it's Oscars week. It's finally here. Antonio on our text thread noted that because I shared that I was listening to Oscars music, and that he made the very astute observation that this is like Christmas for me, and it really is. I hadn't thought about it in that context, but it definitely is. So voting has closed. All the precursor awards have been given, and the ceremony will air live on ABC Sunday, March 10th, 7 Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. I feel like that was an ad. It's not. It's just we're excited about the Oscars. We do not get paid by the Oscars at all.
Unless.
What? Unless? Oh yeah, unless they contact us, and then we're open to. It's not like we're not open to the idea of being sponsored.
Ready to shill. Come on, everybody.
PT's gonna sell us out in the drop of a hat. It's like
100%. Let's go.
Yeah. You are listening to part 2, but it's not Doom part 2. Sorry for the confusion. We've recorded so many episodes this week. You're listening to part 2 of our final Oscar predictions episode. We split all 23 categories right down the middle. And so on Monday, Greg and I recorded, and we focused more on the things that he was more qualified to talk about relative to the rest of us, because he's actually seen all of the shorts, the international features, the documentary features. He's seen it all. And so we covered a lot of those categories last time. And today we are tackling, a wide variety of categories, but particularly the below the line or craft categories. With you don't necessarily need to listen in any particular order, but just know that this is part 2 of a 2-part series that we're covering all the Oscar categories. So the other categories that are not above the line that we're going to be covering today are actress, supporting actor, original screenplay, and best song. So a lot of fun stuff to talk about. And at the end, we will be circling back. Greg and I on Monday talked about best picture, but we're also going to circle back to best picture to see what additional thoughts PT Antonio have on that race as well. But first, PT, if listeners think we're deserving of an award after listening to this episode, what can they do?
If people want to hand out some awards to us by giving us listens, ratings, and reviews, they can do so wherever they get their podcast. Wherever you're listening to us right now, you can just subscribe, and then you can give us a rating and a review. That would be lovely. But we are up on Apple Podcasts, Overcast, Spotify, YouTube, really anywhere that you could get your podcasts. Our home base is Jen's Substack, thelongtake.substack.com. You can subscribe there to not only get updates about every new episode of the podcast, but also see her wonderful written reviews that somehow she's also doing on top of all of this Oscar work. She's a machine. So you can do all of that, and you can also follow us on social media, on Instagram or Threads at The Long Take Review, or you can follow our letterbox page, LTR Pod, and you can tag your reviews or look for tags in reviews, also LTR Pod, to see what we're watching and share with us what you're watching.
Thanks, PT. So we are really close to just getting into these categories, but first I wanted to kind of do a general temperature check for both of you. How are you feeling about Sunday? Are you excited? What's that sort of bigger picture feeling for you? Does this feel different than past years? Give me some overall thoughts.
Last year felt a little bit like I guess it seemed inevitable, like once the everything everywhere steamroller started, but because BAFTA like pretty much ignored the movie, I think that there was some thoughts about like, well, this could be an interesting year, and there could be some surprises. This year doesn't feel like it's going to be that surprising. Right?
It's true. Yeah, things feel more settled than they did this time last year, for sure. I agree. How about you, PT?
I agree, but the benefit in my opinion is I feel like last year was such a good year for movies. Like there's so many wonderful movies, and there's so many wonderful nominees. Like the big problem I think that we have, and we'll probably get into this, is that there are additional people we wish were nominated. Like not necessarily even like, I'm sure there'll be a few times where we can identify like boot this person out to replace them with someone else. But it also could, the nominees are all really good. And most, if not all of the front runners are ones that I would be glad to see win. So in that sense, if I put aside sort of, the sort of slight, small percentage differences of like, but I want the second place one more than the first place one. If I put those aside, it's mostly just going to be a celebration of movies that I enjoyed and I am happy to see win a bunch of awards. So even if it's not necessarily going to be surprising, hopefully it will be a fun victory lap for a great year of movies. What about you, Jen? What do you think? What's changed since part one?
Since the like 48 hours that have passed since I talked about this last. Not a ton, though. I feel like I have heard more people sort of say like, "Oh, it's so inevitable." There's lots of jokes about like, "Oh, yes, Oppenheimer, like we knew it all along." And I feel like every time my mind starts sort of like inching towards being like bored is the wrong word. I can never be bored by the Oscars and by movies, but you know what I mean? Like once it's like, oh, I wish it were a little spicier, right? But then I'm like, that's ungrateful. We should be grateful that we don't have terrible nominees in most of these categories and that we are happy. I'm happy about most of the projected winners. And so like, I think that just that reminder, it can be easy to kind of like when you live and breathe this stuff all the time for many months, it can be easy for everybody to sort of be like, oh, it's so boring, right? But it's, it's really not, like you said.
And
There's a
there
lot of
are
awesome movies.
Jen and I were, when we've mentioned this a couple times, I think, but we were off at an academic conference, but we were talking about podcasting, and our fellow panelist and podcaster from the Nostalgia Test, Dan Dissinger, was like, "I watched 2 movies last year. I watched John Wick Chapter 4 and Barbie, and that's it. He hadn't seen any other new movies. It was all nostalgia ones for his show." And then doing work. So there are a lot of people who are just going to be learning about these movies for the first time because they watch the Oscars or because they watch a clip package of it or read a summary about it. So that's also nice that it'll be introduced there. In terms of the inevitability, it's also we might get into this during the awards, but I'll also just say, could be like we're only a couple of moves away from a like historic number of wins for one of these movies.
Oh, true.
We were texting about this, that the presumed winner for the movie that has like the most number of awards that it's presumed they're going to win, just the like, oh, that's already locked in, like they've already got that like secured, is already as many awards as Everything Everywhere All at Once got last year. So if
and
they
that was
just
considered a sweep,
right, and that was like, what a dominant night. And so if they just take 2 or 3 if they take 3 of the other ones that they are very much in contention for, suddenly they're in double digits in terms of wins. And I think it's been since Return of the King that we've seen a movie that did that. So yeah, it's
a little teaser for what I'm sure will be Oscars history lessons later.
Yeah, well,
don't spoil it.
Let's not make too many promises. I didn't do that much research for preparing for this.
All right. So what we're going to do, if you didn't listen to the episode that Greg and I did already, the general setup is going to be, we're going to go category by category. We're going to take turns reading the nominees, and then each of us will share who we think will win and who we think should win, right? So just because we're predicting someone to win doesn't mean that we endorse that prediction, right? Or that win. And our preferences oftentimes are split. Sometimes they're the same, but oftentimes what we want to happen is different than what we predict will happen because of what the Academy wants or how the campaigns went, all those sorts of other contextual factors, right? So we're going to start with Best Actress. Antonio, will you do the honors?
Of course. The nominees for Best Actress are Annette Bening in Naiad, Lily Gladstone for Killers of the Flower Moon, Sandra Hüller for Anatomy of a Fall, Carey Mulligan for Maestro, and Emma Stone for Poor Things. So what do you all think? Who do you think will win this category?
I mean, this is one of the few that feels like it's still up in the air. But I have put down on the list that I do think Lily Gladstone wins. It's been, for those who are just tuning in to the whole process, it's been a battle between Lily Gladstone in Killers of the Flower Moon and Emma Stone in Poor Things. They've been calling each other the Infinity Stones. They seem to really be in each other's corner. And celebrating when the other person wins. But it feels like the SAG win by Lily Gladstone seemed like, okay, that's that they split the Golden Globes. Emma Stone won at BAFTA, where Lily Gladstone wasn't nominated, but I think nothing from Killers of the Flower Moon was nominated, so it wasn't like they didn't win head to head. Whereas they were head to head at SAG, and Lily won. So yeah, I think it's Lily, but it's maybe not a coin flip, but it's like 55-45. Yes. Jen, what do you think at this point?
Yeah, it is very, very close. And I think if there's going to be an upset or a surprise for people's predictions, this is a very, like, in the top 3 categories, I think, where it could happen. I do think most of the pundits they're very hesitant, they're nervous, but they are picking Lily Gladstone for the reasons that you just said, right? The SAG. And it's also, I would note, not just the fact that she won at SAG, period, but it actually is the timing of SAG, because that win and that telecast occurred during voting. And just oftentimes that late breaking momentum, that last push is what you would need. So I've heard lots of people be like, I have had Emma Stone predicted up until SAG, and now I'm totally switching over to Lily Gladstone because, it just made that much of an impression. And then also, like, you can kind of look at it from a couple different angles. One is like, Emma Stone has already won an Oscar, so a lot of people might feel like she's taken care of. The Academy usually likes to make history when they can, right? So her Lily Gladstone win, extremely well deserved, right? There's no sense that she would be getting this just because of the history making, but that if it is really, really close between the two of them, that might be something that pushes people over the edge towards Lily Gladstone. And so the idea that she'd be like the first, is it Indigenous in general or a Native American actress? I can't remember quite what the specific, it might be both, but she would be a first time winner, for an Indigenous actress. I'm pretty sure. And so that's like, like the people want to see that happen. And the sense from all of the podcasters who are also journalists who attend these ceremonies, and particularly we're at SAG, they sort of said that the energy in the room really felt like people want this. They want this to happen. David Canfield from Vanity Fair said it was euphoric. that was the mood in the room when Lily Gladstone got up on the stage. So yeah, that's where my vote's going right now, but I'm nervous about it. Yeah, but do we feel like, because I think, Antonio, it looks like we are all in agreement about who will win, but Antonio, who do you think should win?
So, I mean, it's very close for me. For me, it's between um, uh, Sandra Hüller and Emma Stone. But then the more think about Lily Gladstone, and after watching her Screen Actors Guild win, and I'll admit, like that energy was palpable even from like watching like at home,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you could just tell. And that performance has sort of stayed with me. It's quieter, it's more subtle than either of the others, right? Um, but there's like a power and a resonance to it that remains. That being said, um, I think Sandra Hüller is just incredible, and I think that performance showed a lot of range, and in terms of
Mm.
craft, right? I think that of all the nominees, she's the one I'd want to sit down with and break down every choice and every scene, right? Like the sort of technical. And I've actually watched some of they have like these actress roundtables, and I'm always really curious about like her choices in particular, because the wrong move in that movie in particular, tips the scales in a way that maybe makes the mystery sort of like less mysterious.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
I thought like a tightrope that she walked, and just a fascinating performance. So to me, that's the actorly, like, I don't know that I know that much about acting, but like it just seems like that's the one that I just found the most powerful, just by a nose, over Emma Stone and Lily Gladstone. But it's really close. What about you all? What about your should?
Well, my should, I mean, my should have been nominated is Greta Lee, but we did the letters. We talked about that,
Yeah,
but
we moved past that.
I still have some shoulds for some of the below the line categories, but still wanted to shout her out. So I fully cheated again in the spirit of the letters and what we did in Best Actress, and I wanted a tie. I wanted a statistical tie between Lily Gladstone and Sandra Hüller, which for all the reasons that Antonio said. I'm fully acknowledging though that I am skewed by my interest in, well, let's spread the wealth, both in terms of who in their lifetime has an Academy Award, and also the movies, because it seems like Killers of the Flower Moon's probably not, spoiler for the rest of the episode, is probably not in line to get any other Academy Award. This is the one that everything has sort of been funneling towards. And it's just one of those, it's sort of a bad beat. I understand that, there's reasons specifically why people push back on this movie. But I feel like there very easily could be another year where this is the movie that's looking at 5, 6, 7 wins in the categories it got nominated, and instead that's not happening. So I want Lily to get it. Whereas both Poor Things and Anatomy of a Fall have spaces in other parts. But also, like, if Emma Stone didn't already have a statue, I might be like, oh, that performance was so incredible. Like, sorry, international body, and sorry, women of color, but like, we're going with Emma Stone for the win. But she has one, so that's easier for me to say. So I'll be very happy. I hope Lily wins. But everything Antonio said is right. I feel like in assuming that either Lily or Emma win in 10 years, there will be people being like, how did Sandra Hüller not win? She carries that movie. And they'd be right. They'll be right to look back and wonder, like, what did we do?
Right. And I think the other thing too is that looking at this list of nominees, screen time is a factor. And so in terms of the marks against Lily Gladstone as a solid prediction or the one who will win, a lot of people are saying that there might be a lot of voters that sort of resent the fact that she's in the lead actress, right, and not in supporting because of just the percentage of screen time that she has compared to, Leonardo DiCaprio, for instance, or something like that, right? Like that she's only in a certain percentage of the movie and it's not quite enough. And we talked about this when we did our initial review of Killers, but a lot of people are like, she spends a ton of the movie just sick in bed, not saying anything, and that to them is not acting, apparently. So, there is that danger kind of lurking in there. But to me, it's the should win actually for that reason. The fact that she has relatively little screen time and her presence is the centripetal force of the film, right? And that she's the hero of the film. Basically, it's definitely not Leonardo DiCaprio's character. The more I think about it, he's not. He may be the character through which we experience a lot of the film, but he's not the hero of the film. She is, and so I think it's just really impressive and really powerful that she's able to do that. And but if you think about it, a lot of these other nominees are very much more traditionally what the Academy likes to reward, right? Like, and I would include Annette Bening and Nyad. She's out there, she's loud, she's here, right? Like, you can't ignore her, I think. And I would classify Emma Stone's type of performance as, I think a lot of critics have called it, a very actor friendly performance, meaning like she's doing things that other actors would see and be like, oh, that looks so fun, like I wish I could do that, or like, you know what I mean, or that it's just so like bombastic and flashy and requires a lot of, extroversion, right, basically, and all the the physicality of it and all that sort of stuff. So that's, and I would say the same thing for Sandra Hüller. Like, I think like you were just saying, Antonio, like, she is that movie, right? And PT said she carries the movie. So I think that's the major challenge. That's the thing that gives me pause of like, can Lily Gladstone do it, right? Can she pull it through? But we'll see. But yeah, what do you both of you, because I don't know if we talked about this, what do you both of you think about what counts as actress versus supporting actress?
That's a good question. I mean, it does always feel fuzzy, and there's always sort of calls of category fraud. We usually, when it's usually on the actress side, and it's when someone is a lead role, but because there's a prominent man in it too, they're like, well, then this is a supporting woman, so it gets moved to supporting actress. So it's interesting that there's been so much blowback when this, people have, it does kind of gone the other way, where it like is kind of on the cusp, and they went with lead instead. I think that if they are central to the movie, if the plot and the character interactions, and I don't get into too English majoring, say the themes, but if they all kind of run through someone who's present through most of the movie, and they're prominently placed. That makes sense to have them in lead, as opposed to someone who is either only sporadically around or is, you know, only sort of steps forward, maybe like for a handful of scenes. So I didn't have any problem with her being categorized as a lead. It did feel like, you know, if they had opted to put her in supporting, beyond undermining the whole narrative of what the movie was and what they were trying to have it be, she probably would be marching. No offense to Da'Vine Joy Randolph, but she would have the Da'Vine Joy Randolph experience of just like, here's every award, like get all your speeches ready, which would kind of be a shame, because like it's been awesome seeing Da'Vine Joy Randolph, and she gave an amazing performance. But yeah, that's what I think about lead versus supporting, and I think the one thing that hasn't been mentioned that I think would have happened in either category is that, you know, this movie took a while to come out. You know, there was pandemic filming, and then it was delayed because of like the editing, and so I feel like we had that screenshot of Lily and Leo at the dinner table for, like, I felt like almost like 20 months of just seeing that from the movie, and like since it started filming, people were like, Lily Gladstone Academy Award, done. So the sort of stories of her performance were around for a really long time. So I feel like when people went to see the movie, there was some degree of like, prove it, like prove you're actually as good as this hype.
Right.
And I think you know, that attitude is never good for a performance or for the movie in general. And so I do think the fact that she's even still vying and still probably like the favorite speaks to how good she is in it.
For the lead versus supporting thing, I'm going to go back to the very first Oscars I really cared about, because this was a controversy back in 1991. But I think now looking back, it's not really it, like, it makes perfect sense, which was Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lamb, because his screen time is it's not a lot of screen time, but his impact on the movie and how he, as PT said, the way he's like, everyone's thinking about him throughout the movie, right? He's like just this menacing force throughout the movie. So it's perfect sense. Like, of course, he's the lead actor. Like, he's like the character that people remember. I mean, Clarice Starling was also amazing. Jodie Foster is amazing in that too. But so I don't know. Like, it's a very different role. Obviously, it's not as flashy in the same way. But I feel like when I think of Killers of the Flower Moon, her face is the face that I remember, right? And her performance is the one that is sort of inextricably linked to it, and that's amazing in a cast that includes Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro, right? So I'm fine. I think it makes sense for her to be in lead too.
Yeah, no, I like it. And the last thing that I will add is that there have been a lot of comparisons between this race this year and last year's, between Cate Blanchett and Michelle Yeoh. Mostly, I think, because it's like, you know, his historical win potentially versus already won an Oscar veteran performance, but that is, the performance itself is like pretty undeniable, and so but also because they're very, I think it's a similar thing too, because the two performances in their style and tone are very, very different, right? They're just very, like, the goals of them are very different. So what do we think about this? Is that a good indicator that, because Michelle Yeoh won last year, is that a good indicator? Is that supporting Lily Gladstone outcome?
I mean, it might be, except for the fact that there does tend to be a pendulum swing at the Academy, where when it goes one way, then you know, historically, and I guess I'm thinking more in like the Best Picture area, where it will be sort of like, oh, Moonlight, that's great. Oh, then Green Book, and then it's like, oh, but then Parasite. And so, you know, there's a little you know, there's a little ebb and flow, I guess, of how much they're sort of willing to kind of you know, use their votes one year to maybe refute or at least maybe respond to, if refute is too strong, respond to what happened in previous years. So maybe there's some people that are like, well, look, we gave the newcomer, although neither Michelle Yeoh or Lily Gladstone are particularly newcomers, but, you know,
First time nominee.
Yeah, we gave the diversity candidate, to use the terrible term. We gave them that last year, so let's give the veteran, who I think Emma Stone's younger than Lily Gladstone, certainly younger than Michelle Yeoh and Kate Blanchett. That that like maybe there'll be that sort of enough people. It's close enough that enough folks think that way. Or it could just be this is the new trend. They've been expanding the Academy, getting more international, getting more diverse within the people who are there, and maybe some of those old fluctuations are in the past and they're on a new course. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I think it can help us try to frame our predictions, but I think it's really only going to be helpful once we get the results.
Yeah. The other complicating factor too, and I can't remember which podcast I was listening to that pointed this out, but the big difference between these last year and this year is that Michelle Yeoh was the star of the Best Picture winner. And it is unlikely that Lily Gladstone is from this year's Best Picture winner.
Wait a minute.
Oh, okay. I guess we're spoiling something for later. I don't know.
No, it won't.
Right, like Killers of the Flower Moon is not a front runner, right? And Everything Everywhere All at Once was, and so that's the only thing that, again, there's lots to give us pause and make, or I should say me. There's lots to give me pause and make me really nervous. This is the category I'm gonna be like on the edge of my couch, being like, like what's gonna happen? And I'll probably like throw something either way. Like it's just that's certainly what's going to happen with this one. But yeah, so like lots to mull over. But listener, keep in mind if you're filling out your Oscar ballot, doing your Oscar pool, we're all saying Lily Gladstone. So that's the safer bet at this point. But just know if it ends up being Emma Stone, don't get mad at us.
And if someone besides the two of them, do get mad at us. But know that if it was Sandra Hüller, we're all really pumped.
That's true. That we'll at least be happy about it. All right. So next up is supporting actor.
So the nominees for Best Supporting Actor are Sterling K. Brown in American Fiction, Robert De Niro in Killers of the Flower Moon, Robert Downey Jr. in Oppenheimer, Ryan Gosling in Barbie, and Mark Ruffalo in Poor Things. Maybe in my mind, when you look at the nominees and like if you make another slate of 5 people who could have been nominated but weren't, maybe the strongest category, or at least the one that had the most like candidates that I all wanted to get in, because like I could easily make another slate of 5 people. So Jen, what do you think? Who do you
let's get the will win out of the way, because I think that's not complicated. It's Robert Downey Jr.
in a walk.
Yes, he's been sweeping everything. Not quite as many, I think, as Dave Joy Randolph. And I think it was really funny is that someone actually was like, no, Dave Joy Randolph has only lost to Charles Melton at the Gothams or whatever. Like right. There was like literally one award.
A non-gendered category, and she's won some of those.
Right. Yeah. So Robert Downey Jr. is not quite at that level, but he's pretty close, especially in the back half of award season. I feel like he just hasn't missed.
I think the only person he's lost to with any sort of consistency is Charles Melton, who wasn't nominated. Like it was in those Critics Awards when Charles Melton seemed to be gaining some steam. But yeah, I think in any of, I don't know if any of these other people, there's one or two who maybe have picked out a couple of awards here or there, but nothing prominent and with no consistency.
Right. And I think, Oppenheimer's really strong. And even if it's not like a sweep, like I would put Robert Downey Jr. in even on Oppenheimer's worst day, probably. And there are like, there's maybe one potential spoiler that I can think of. Does anyone want to guess what that might be?
The thing is I could honestly see almost any of them potentially being a spoiler, but I'll guess you're thinking Ryan Gosling because of like Barbie momentum.
Right. So if Barbie somehow, I am pretty conservative right now about, I think the Academy is going to do what a lot of other awards bodies have done with Barbie and be like, we love you, Barbie. Hi, Barbie. Welcome, Barbie. We're going to like show, the camera's going to cut to you a lot, Barbie, but we're not going to give you any awards. So I really think that if that's true, which is what I'm kind of thinking right now, I wouldn't guess Ryan Gosling. But if for some reason I'm wrong, and the internet discourse about like we're so incensed that Barbie's getting ignored and that Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie didn't get nominated, if all of that stuff is overlapping with the Academy at all, and Barbie somehow has a big night or bigger night than we think, this is a place that can happen. I think it's unlikely, but I think it can happen.
Well, Antonio, what I guess we're all in agreement on who would win. Do you want to talk about who should win as a follow up from what Jen was just saying?
Yeah, I think that I mean, first of all, I agree that there are a lot of people on this, like Charles Melton included, and Paul Mescal, who I think we could have, like, I would have happily put as my should win. But on this list, Ryan Gosling, I think that just comedy is just harder than drama, and I think that he was so funny and brought so much wit to a role that could have been thankless. Um, so um, so I could see him as a spoiler. I actually don't think that he's the one who would pull it out. Like if there were a shocker in this category, I actually think it would be Sterling K. Brown, um,
Oh,
because of how American Fiction overperformed. I think in the nominations, I think that
that's a
there's
good
just
point.
a lot of strength, and so if something were coming out of left field, that's the one that I think it could be. I still think Robert Downey Jr. has this, both because it's an incredible performance in what is, spoiler alert, probably, right, like the going to be the best picture of the year,
Oh,
and
Shocking.
but
twist.
also it's also a career award for like an
Yeah.
actor
Yes.
who is well respected. So but Gosling would be on this list is my should win.
Yeah. My should win is also Ryan Gosling. I mean, first of all, I want to say I'm probably out of the four of us the highest on Oppenheimer, and I think Robert Downey Jr. is incredible in Oppenheimer. So I just want to put that out there that this is not to say that I strongly prefer Ryan Gosling over Robert Downey Jr., but I feel like we are underappreciating Ryan Gosling. We are taking him for granted, and it's not right. And I feel like he's been paraded around everywhere. You know what I mean? Like we've made him give that Jim from The Office kind of look at the camera constantly at every award show. We've memeified him, right? And what thanks is he gonna get, right? And like Antonio said, comedy is really hard, and what he's doing in the movie is it's not just like, and I think a lot of people are like, oh, everyone just likes Ryan Gosling. He's so handsome. He's so charming, whatever. Right. But if you actually think about his performance as Ken, he has to have many layers and a lack of self-awareness about those layers. Right. And he has to both understand that as an actor and then act against that as his character of Ken. Right. And I feel like, from the weird like insecure looks he's giving as he's moving across the dance floor towards Simu Liu, right? Like that's like that to me is like an iconic comedic moment in this movie. But flash forward to the towards the end of the movie where his character is really forced to confront a lot of things, and he's kind of like having a breakdown. I think people are forgetting that's a pretty classic Oscar reel right there. Like that the clip, and I hope that's the clip they show where he's like, "I'm nothing without Barbie." You know what I mean? Like that, the whole thing where he's sort of like breaking down. It just happens to be in a comedy movie about a toy. So like, I think that's the reason that people are really quick to say that they love him in Barbie, but no one has really stepped forward to be like, and he is deserving of winning this Oscar. You know what I mean? Like we're not willing to go that far, and I think that's it's a raw deal.
Yeah, then there is something obviously complicated because a lot of the things you were saying, maybe about Ryan Gosling's performance and the layers of it, maybe except for the part about the full lack of self awareness, could also be said for Margot Robbie, and of course the
Right.
whole thing that she wasn't nominated
Yes.
in the lead actress, and there was a big pushback on that, and so I think there's a degree now where people are like, well, now I can't vote for Ryan Gosling because then it looks even worse if we only give an Oscar to the man character, which feels like kind of a cop out if folks are actually thinking that, because this is an incredible performance. I loved Ryan Gosling in it. It would be wonderful if he won. Again, this is a category where I need to double check everyone who's in here. Yeah, I would absolutely love all of these people to win. Like any one of these folks winning would be good. And again, I did work out a slate of 5 who weren't nominated, and I still had snubs. Like I still had people who didn't make the 6 through 10. So yeah, I think
but you do have one person in particular on this list that you are rooting for. That the
I
rest of us
do.
maybe are not.
I do, and so everyone's talking RDJ, and I'm talking about RDN. I'm going for the other Robert De Niro, in Killers of the Flower Moon, which is the opposite of the Robert Downey Jr. or Ryan Gosling. Like, here's your anointment as a new welcome into the club. This would instead be the sort of career capper, the third acting Oscar to join Daniel Day-Lewis and Meryl Streep, and the other people, Jack Nicholson, who have won 3. Because it's really an incredible performance. It's obviously a very different movie than Barbie, but I think similarly, it has so many layers that feel like effortless, that it's like this person who is, on the one hand being so open and blatant, to a degree that I think it unnerved people, how much the first like 15 or 20 minutes of the movie is him just being like, well, I'm a bad guy who's doing bad things, like, and I'm evil. But then, like, as the movie keeps going, it's like, but he clearly doesn't think that he's a bad guy. He just, like, he thinks he's doing all of this and he's being really supportive. And it isn't even that he has like 2 faces, that he has like a mask he wears for others. It's that he's in such like arrogant denial about who he is and what he's doing. And that sort of mode is just very different from the De Niro we're used to, which is, either been the sort of tough guy, like, trying to like fight his way through something, or the sort of buffoon comedy guy, who is, again, generally pretty confident, but without a lot of support for it. So, the fact that he's, in his 80s, and has turned in such an amazing performance, again, in a movie which Lily Gladstone is shining, Leo DiCaprio still maybe our biggest movie star, and he's just coming in and throwing heat and really like doing stuff where I think if that performance isn't as well calculated as it is, I think the movie doesn't hold together. So yeah, I would support that. But again, love that Robert Downey Jr. will likely win the award. Would love it if Ryan Gosling did come out and surprise. And I loved Mark Ruffalo and Sterling K. Brown in 2 of my favorite movies of the year. So that would also be great. I will note, I don't have a vote in the Academy Awards, so I could not vote for Sterling K. Brown, but I did get to vote for Christopher Darden as a judge in Los Angeles County yesterday. So in many ways, that's the closest I could do for coming to vote for Sterling K. Brown.
Do you want to explain that reference to
Sure,
people listening who don't know?
Christopher Darden, who was one of the prosecutors in the OJ trial, was played by Sterling K. Brown in The People versus OJ Simpson, the miniseries. And Christopher Darden, the actual human being, was running for judge. I don't believe he won, but I did vote for him. The guides I saw said he was the least objectionable of the slate of candidates for that seat. Shots fired at whoever won, of being more objectionable. Sorry, Judge.
I have to say, before I saw American Fiction, sorry, to bring it back to actual Sterling K. Brown nominated in this category. Sorry, I thought
it was a good bit, Jen. You can cut
it. I know it was. I'm just being mean. The Sterling, before I saw American Fiction, I remember sort of people talking about Sterling K. Brown and being like, he could get nominated, but like, why? Like people were kind of like confused by the potential that he could get nominated, or actually, I think when nominations, I had seen American Fiction when nominations came out, but when I actually saw him in the movie, I was like, of course he should get nominated for this. This is great. Like, because he has to be the comic relief, but then also so much more than that. And I think that's probably, again, it's like kind of a Ryan Gosling problem a little bit, where I think that's why people are sort of more dismissive of the role, because it has comedic elements in it. And like, you could say that he just spends time in kitchens doing drugs throughout the whole movie, and that's like the entirety of his contribution. But it's not. Like, if you're forgetting some key scenes, if that's what you're saying, I feel like. And he provides so much like warmth and heart, and he has like some of the best line deliveries at the end of that movie, I think. All right, so next up we have original screenplay. The nominees are Anatomy of a Fall, The Holdovers, Maestro, May December, and Past Lives. I actually was kind of surprised that we were all in agreement about this, but we're all saying Anatomy of a Fall, it looks like. Right?
That's been the momentum. I mean, it felt for a while like The Holdovers was, had the juice, and that, because that sort of took second place for a while. This has been to make a comparison that is very unflattering to everyone involved. It sort of felt like some of the Republican primaries over the last like 15 years, when there's like a candidate where everyone's like, but we don't want this person, right? And like there's another person, there's like, what about Herman Cain? What about Carly Fiona? What about Rick Perry? And it's like, it's Mitt Romney, everyone. It's Mitt Romney. It's going to be Mitt Romney. Like, calm down. And that's sort of what Oppenheimer has been. And there's been all these other movies where it's like, but what about Past Lives? What about Poor Things? What about Zone of Interest? And it's always been Oppenheimer as the leader. But The Holdovers was that movie for a little while, and so people thought maybe this would have a chance to do that. But Anatomy of a Fall has just been racking up the wins, and this, because it was foolishly, it seems, not submitted by France into international feature. This is like the place where it seems most likely to get its recognition. Unclear. Maybe this won't be a Spread the Wealth year, and it will. There'll be an All Quiet on the Western Front that sort of formulates, and that could be a Holdovers. But it doesn't seem like there's been any indication of that. So it feels like this is where they're very comfortable saying, Justine Triet, Anatomy of a Fall, you get this Oscar. Thank you for this movie.
Yeah, my rationale was very similar, where I was sort of like, well, there's a lot of momentum from Anatomy of a Fall, not just because it's been winning in this category in precursors, not just because of that, but because of, we got Messi the dog out on the campaign trail, winning hearts and minds, right? Left and right. Everybody loves him, including Ryan Gosling. That was the best clip of Ryan Gosling meeting Messi the dog. It was precious. And so there's that. And then there's also the Justine Triet factor, right? I think like she's really just been crushing every opportunity to speak in front of people. And her and Arthur Harari, I think it was at BAFTA when they accepted for screenplay, they made jokes about like if one of us dies, like, you'll know why. Kind of, you know what I mean? Like they were making jokes, and they've been doing this throughout the campaign, is that like they were like, well, Justine Triet makes it very clear. She's like, I wrote this with my spouse, but we are not writing about ourselves in this movie. Like, she's like, it's just very, very separate. And she's like, maybe it's the other way around, where like things start to bleed into our lives because we're living and breathing the screenplay. So that's why there are jokes about like, if one of them disappears, we'll know who to suspect, right? And that's hilarious. They're killing it. And so I think there's just a lot of energy going in towards Anatomy of a Fall, but not a lot of places other than this. This is what you're saying already, for it to go. And that's very specifically because this is a whole different scenario if it's nominated in international feature, right? Because that becomes the sort of dumping ground of all the momentum of like, oh, okay, it's going to get that. We don't need to give it anything else. But because it's not even nominated there, there's no kind of like release valve for all the goodwill for this movie, right? Because we can't bump out Christopher Nolan, right? And we can't bump, like it's like everywhere else it would get rewarded, there's someone else who's a stronger candidate. And so yeah, so I think it's all happening, getting concentrated and happening here. Antonio, what do you think? Why did you land on Anatomy?
I mean, for all the reasons that you all said, also it's an amazing screenplay,
It
right?
really is.
It's really incredible. Like, genres that we are familiar with, the legal procedural, the domestic drama, like this is well-trodden territory, but in the hands of these screenwriters, it was invigorating, exciting, and just like a movie that if you watch it, you just have to talk about it for like hours afterwards, right? So, um, I was surprised too to sort of see it continue to win, to take awards from places that I didn't expect it to take awards. Um, but like, even though I have a different should win for this, it's just because like I love 4 of these 5 screenplays, right? Like,
Same.
yeah, right? And I will be perfectly happy like if this ends up winning. I do think that The Holdovers is probably the one that's that if there's going to be an upset, that's the most likely to take it, and that's an excellent screenplay too, and like the most moving of these films, and the most sort of like Oscar friendly. Um but but I do think that you all are right that like this is the sort of high profile win for Anatomy of a Fall, right? And for a movie that it seems like destined for something. So yeah.
Jen,
But
can I want to ask your opinion. I mean, Antonio, you may have an opinion as well, but I feel like Jen's more in the weeds on this. Do you think if Barbie had stayed in original, which for listeners maybe don't, this was covered on part one, but it was being submitted as an original screenplay, but because it's based on a intellectual property, being based on pre-existing characters from a toy line, was enough for the Academy judges to rule it as adapted. So you have to listen to Greg talk about that instead of us, Greg and Jen. So, but Jen, do you think if it was still an original, would Barbie be walking away with this, or would there be a fight between it and Anatomy?
I think it would still be a fight because of the problem I described of like there isn't really another place to put passion for Anatomy, right? I do think that Barbie won enough precursors as an original screenplay, right? This is the problem, is that like a lot of precursors categorize it as original. The Oscars have categorized it as adapted. So it's much harder to use those precursors because it's like, well, they're competing against totally different films. But I do think it won enough that it would be a strong contender in this category for sure. And then who knows? Like maybe the snub discourse overtakes Anatomy of a Fall somehow, and like that, and then people. But again, like there's a huge question mark about, is the snub discourse just the people on the internet, or is it the Academy, like, or is it both? So that would be still, I think that the questions I have about Barbie in general at the Oscars this year, I think I would have about this category as well. But it would have the track record to back it up as a contender. I don't think it walks away with it though, because of what you just said, because it's like, think about what classically or historically gets rewarded in this category, right? It's very writerly things. And that's not to say Barbie isn't a writerly screenplay. It's very smart screenplay, and that's what makes the movie so amazing, is because it's like so much smarter and kind of more complicated, and like I think the phrase I used in our original review was like a high wire act. It's so much more sophisticated than anyone would expect from a movie about Barbie, right? But that's not to say it's like when you compare it beat for beat with something like Anatomy of a Fall, or like basically anything except Maestro in this category, it's harder because these screenplays feel a little bit more like the more literary, right? More like
sure.
snooty, right? If you're gonna, or
Yeah.
like like if high arty, because it's not as populist as Barbie. So I think that would be working against it.
I also feel like if it were nominated here, or even if it were this were happening and adapted, if it became the frontrunner, presumed winner screenplay, we would have heard more discourse from Academy voters of, we're really going to give a screenplay award to a toy. Like, it's a movie about a toy.
Right.
It's a big commercial, which is very unfair. But I think that there are enough people who would think that, and that would get traction in the conversation, in the discourse. That would be a threat for it actually winning. But
that sounds like an anonymous ballot quote, what you just said.
It does. And the only reason I haven't seen it is maybe because I haven't watched enough. I haven't read enough of them I haven't been keeping up with sending them to the three of you.
That's probably wise.
Yes. Antonio, who do you we both agreed on what movie we want to win. What movie is that? Who do we want to win?
Past lives. The letter award winner, Past Lives. Again, it's an embarrassment of riches in this category. I love the holdovers. I love May December too. But Past Lives, it's just such a stunning movie, and it all starts with a stunning, like brilliantly structured, brilliantly executed screenplay. Like everything is just so carefully calibrated, and it comes down to the words. It starts with the words, right? And like this is a movie I wish, like I think is probably going to go home empty-handed. And I think of all of its sort of chances, this is probably its maybe best shot, but it's not a great shot. um, but I'd be thrilled, as much as I love Anatomy of a Fall, right? Like, I don't know. This reminds me of like when you're watching a Super Bowl and like you love both teams and it's fine, right? Like, and you'd be fine with either result, right? Like again, here, 4 of the 5, I'd be okay with. So PT, why was Past Lives your choice here?
Oh, I mean, I don't know what to say on top of what you said. I think the movie is incredible. I do think it's rooted in the writing. It makes a lot of sense that this is a playwright who was the writer director of this movie, because the the character movements, the things that are said, the things that are not said, are so well structured and so well laid out, and allow for the performances, which are also incredible, to flower. So and also just the progression of what happens, that just the sort of the outline kind of events, is really smart and really well chosen. I feel like it's one of those movies where there were a few times where it's like, oh, this could go off the rails now. Like they could go in a direction that kind of makes it mawkish or whatever. It'll just start to fall apart. And it never did that. It always made the smart choice, and it always sort of moved forward. And yeah, I'm with you that really any of these four winning would be great. Let's take out Maestro, put in Boy and the Heron, and that would be good.
Yes.
For my roster. I'm going to put Antonio on the spot though. Antonio, if there's a past lives upset in adapted screenplay, will you call in from your family vacation, your international family vacation, to get on to talk with us about it for the reaction show?
I will. I will.
Yes.
I will. I will.
Yes.
I will move heaven and earth to do it. Well, I will figure it out.
All right.
Amazing.
I love it.
So I also love past lives. I'm going to talk about my pick in a second, but just yesterday, I want to say, on my social media feed, a quote popped up from past lives. You dream in a language that I can't understand. It's like there's this whole place inside of you where I can't go, and I'm just like, bah, give it all the Oscars all over. I was like falling in love with it all over again. So I'm definitely with both of you. And honestly, like, if there is an upset and it's past lives, if there's an upset and there's the holdovers, while I did love the holdovers, I would be a little sad for Anatomy of a Fall. But if past lives is the upset, I'm just like, shouting on the rooftops. Like, it's just like, that's gonna be so great. It's pretty unlikely, I want to say, but sorry to bring it back down with my punditry, but just because it's like this movie only got 2 nominations.
There's literally no reason to believe it would happen apart from like the strangest turn of events.
The one thing is women talking is the only evidence. Yes. Oh, is that what you're going to say? Okay.
Well, I was saying you've been looking for where's the upset? Where's the thing we're not seeing? And is it possible that all that past lives love has just been quietly bottled up? And instead of this being where Anatomy love is directed, it's where past lives.
Because there is a lot of passion for the film. And I do feel like if someone's looking at their Oscar ballot, because it's only nominated in 2 places, right, they're not likely going to nominate it in Best Picture. Or it's not going to be their number 1 or even maybe their number 2 in Best Picture, and therefore it doesn't have a chance there. But they might notice that it's only in Screenplay and be like, "Oh no, but I love that movie." So that's the only scenario in which that happens. I think it's the sleeper passion vote. But I'm going to say that my should win is actually Anatomy of a Fall. And this has actually been my bit all week. This happened a lot on the episode with Greg, where I'm like, you know what, the one who's going to win, I feel good about it. I think that's what I would pick too. And maybe that means that I'm the most like basic Oscar voter out of all of us, if we were part of the Academy, because my tastes do often align with that mentality sometimes. But I would say if I'm thinking about the writing itself in both Past Lives and Anatomy of a Fall, both are exquisite and have just lines that are just like, oh, tell me that again. But I feel like when I think of Anatomy of a Fall, this sort of like intellectual puzzle box part of me is like, it's so juicy and there's so many layers to it. And just intellectually, it is like much deeper, I want to say. I think emotionally, Past Lives is much deeper. But I'd say intellectually, into Anatomy of a Fall is much deeper. And that I feel like I just haven't seen a screenplay like that in some time. I can't actually even think of like a comparable screenplay from recent years, right? And just the fact that it weaves in and out of multiple languages really fluidly. That's the other point in Sandra Hüller's corner, I think, is like that she has to do that. None of those other actresses have to do that, right? Anyway, I don't mean to backtrack, but yeah. So I really love Anatomy of a Fall, and it also balances figurative language with like very literal, practical, technical language, like the legal language, so beautifully. And it's like, yeah, so it's like I'm here for it. I actually kind of wish it didn't come out in the same year as Oppenheimer because I'm like, like I feel like it in any other year it could be the surprise, like sort of like an All Quiet on the Western Front, like suddenly it's winning in like multiple categories or something like that. Bam. All right, next up. No one
Right.
has
The
any
next,
response to that. Yeah, what's next? Best makeup and hairstyling. Antonio,
yes,
take it away.
nominees are Golda, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and Society of the Snow. So here, all three of us have the same will win. So Jen, what do you want to talk about why you think our
Yes.
favorite movie
So
of the year?
we've been beating up on this movie so much on the show. I feel really bad, but
Seems
it's like the
like we're
closest
actually
thing.
very generous. Yeah.
It's the closest thing to. It's just because it's out of the 10 movies that we like in Best Picture, it's the least favorite. So it's just a relativity problem, I think. Anyway, I think that Maestro. So okay, maybe this is the time to introduce my unifying theory of the Oscars this year. Get ready.
Yes.
So because Oppenheimer has the potential, right? We'll talk about whether or not it will actually later, but because Oppenheimer has the potential to win so many categories, I feel like and that has been known for some time, as PT said, right? Like when voting was happening, it was still the like, yeah, it's Oppenheimer, right? We were still doing that, just as we are now. So I think a lot of voters are going to be like, yeah, but like, shouldn't we give something to these other movies because they're all great? And I think there's going to
And also
sneak.
Maestro.
It's going to be.
Yeah.
Well, I'm okay. All right.
Sorry.
But here's the thing: is that the makeup and hairstyling is the perfect give it something to Maestro, because that's the thing about it that is like kind of, whether or not you like it, like the makeup in Maestro is one thing, but you can't argue that there's a lot of it. Which is Academy in these craft categories, often they vote for the most extra, they vote for the most volume, right? Like that's the thing that they're attracted to. Especially the voters that are in the broader academy, not the voters who are actually makeup artists and hairstylists, right? Same thing, prosthetics oftentimes dominates this category, right? See last year, Brendan Fraser in The Whale, right? With another recent big one. I mean, there's so many. Bombshell, The Darkest Hour, right? Academy loves prosthetic induced transformation of an actor. And so even though Maestro as a film doesn't really have a lot of sway right now, doesn't have any momentum of any kind, it's kind of safe to say, it's really kind of fallen off the wayside and kind of become like the one, like, and we're complicit in this, the one joke movie that we had this year. People are just like, yep, Maestro. And I think that this is the one place that people will be comfortable because it sort of will acknowledge what the movie as a whole tried to do in terms of like bringing Leonard Bernstein to life. We can't give it to Bradley Cooper because that category is too stacked and he's apparently too desperate for an Oscar and we don't like that. So we can't do that, but we can this is sort of giving it to him because he's the one wearing the makeup, right? But it's really rewarding the makeup. Also, the makeup artist Kazuhiro is pretty well known in the field, and there's been lots of behind the scenes featurettes kind of floating around of like how many hours was Bradley Cooper in the chair, and like what did he have to do to make him look like Leonard Bernstein and all that sort of stuff. So that's why I think it's gonna, at the end of the day, this is a good place to throw Maestro a bone, and absolve us of like denying Bradley Cooper of his hopes and dreams once again. But that's not to say that it's like a done deal. Do we feel like if we're gonna pick a spoiler here, what do we think it is?
Well, once again, Antonio and I are aligned in our thinking, but the spoiler would seem to be Poor Things, and part of that is because it's one of the movies that won one of the precursors that didn't go to Maestro. Maestro got both of the awards from the Makeup Artists and Hairstylist Guild Awards. So one award in makeup and another award in hairstylist, which is a good precursor. But Poor Things won, I think the BAFTA, if I'm remembering correctly, for the Poor Things won the BAFTA for makeup. And I mean the makeup in there is more fantastical, because I think the one that sort of stands out is Willem Dafoe, because he has a very artistically messed up face, or sort of has a look that is heavy in the prosthetics. But there is sort of, because it's such a I do not mean this in a bad way, but in similar to a Wes Anderson movie, it feels like the artifice of the movie is very present, where it feels like this is sort of like almost like a toy box of a world that they live in, and this is a dollhouse, which is fun to say in a year of Barbie, but yeah, that I think that all the makeup throughout the movie is very impressive, and if we're getting to everything you were saying, Jen, about like, well, one movie is going to win a ton of awards, so let's try to dole this out some other awards. Down here in the craft categories, Poor Things has the possibility for a very strong showing, could win 3 or 4 awards, could win none. And so it's possible that either there's enough momentum for Poor Things to win multiple awards, or people will sort of fall on this, i.e., well, we'll sacrifice Maestro for Poor Things if this is the only award we can give to. We'll only give an award to one of them. Maybe we'll choose Poor Things. So those were my thoughts on it. Antonio, what did you think?
I agree. The aesthetic of that movie is just so vivid, and a lot of it has to do with how these characters look. And to be perfectly honest, I'd forgotten about Willem Dafoe, but that's obviously like the biggest transformation.
Yeah.
But like even Emma Stone's look, and like the people in the
brothel.
That's the word I'm looking for. The brothel. I'm going to put Jen on the spot and ask you a question, Jen, because like we just mentioned 3 makeup winners that aligned with lead acting winners, right? So that's that was Gary Oldman, Meryl Streep, and Brendan Fraser. So if Poor Things does upset in makeup, do you think, because that was how we knew that Brendan Fraser was going to take it
I
over
know.
Austin Butler last year? So if Poor Things wins in makeup over Maestro, does that mean Emma Stone is going to win for lead actress, or is just Lily Gladstone too far ahead?
It very well could, I think. And I think you would be smart in your Oscars puzzle if you are so a mistake you would make potentially in your Oscars puzzle is predicting Poor Things but not predicting Emma Stone. I think if you're doing one, you need to be doing the other because of the stat. The stat favors actors more than actresses, I would say. Is that what you're going to say, PT? Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, in terms of the stat, there's definitely a trend. There is the stat. The outlier, which maybe is the indicator to not tie it so much, is in 2020 when Ma Rainey's Black Bottom won Best Makeup, and then pretty famously, Chadwick Boseman did not win Best Actor, even though they arranged it to be the final award of the night to celebrate the recently deceased Chadwick Boseman.
Viola Davis won Best Actress, didn't she?
No,
I don't believe so.
Wait, did not. No, that was Frances McDormand.
Yeah.
Oh, that was the year. Okay, never mind.
And Viola Davis had won Screen Actors Guild too. So, okay.
It had felt like, in my memory, it felt like it was going to be Viola Davis or Carey Mulligan for Promising Young Women.
So the logic, the sort of inductive reasoning I've heard a lot of pundits use is like the pairing of makeup and acting wins. It's one of those things where like if there's a clear line from A to B, then you lean towards that. But if there isn't kind of like like, you know what I mean? If like Bradley Cooper were a strong contender, then it would be like, predict him and predict Maestro for makeup.
That makes sense.
Right? Like that would be the logical thing. But since there isn't a clear like strong contender that would be makeup, like is a main character in a movie that's nominated for makeup. Right. I think like, and Emma Stone doesn't have enough, like she has amazing eyebrows. I'm going to give you that. Love it. Want it for myself. And and she does have, so I don't know if either of you have heard the behind the scenes story of the hairstylist actually accidentally dyed her hair that color.
Oh, that's
it was
funny.
Supposed to be like a brown or something. Like it was supposed to be a different color that was not jet black, like a weird black. and she was freaking out and was like, I'm gonna get fired. And then Yorgos came in and was like, it's perfect. So like that's the story I heard, and I was like, well, like that's a pretty great story. And like her look, I don't want to spoil another category, but her look is so distinct and I think really contributes and supports her performance. But I feel like there's another category that people can reward that. So that's what I'll say. I don't know. Yeah.
Jen, do you want to talk about the movie that you think should win, which is different?
Yes. So I'm out here, and this might be a function of I'm listed third on our Google Doc, and I was the last to put my picks in. So maybe I'm just trying to be contrary, a contrarian. But like, I picked Oppenheimer. I'm the Oppenheimer stan on the show, I think is what's happening now. I picked Oppenheimer for this, despite everyone throwing shade at the old people makeup in this movie, which granted is pretty mediocre. It's like fine. When they make Emily
good. I don't know. I don't know why everyone's mad about it.
Everyone seems mad about it. I'm glad.
It's just obvious, I guess.
It is obvious.
I thought it was good.
It's standard. Like it's not bad, but it's not like. Whereas I think like Bradley Cooper's old people makeup is just so extra, and there's so many crevices in his face and stuff like that it's like hard to deny that there was a lot of work involved in that. Whereas like Cillian Murphy just looks like he has no hair, like, you know what I mean, and like they dusted him up a little bit, right? Like that's good. But I'm specifically picking Oppenheimer because of Robert Downey Jr. His hairline is real in that movie. He is not wearing a bald cap. They shaved his hairline and moved his hairline for the movie. And I think that's incredible. And granted, that's a credit to him because he was willing to do that, but like, and is committed to his art, apparently. But just the fact that like they managed to do that and not make it look like he had a bad haircut is great. You know what I mean? Because they described it, they're like, oh, they just shaved his head and moved his hairline back and then did makeup. And I'm like, that's amazing. Because it looks like he's wearing some kind of like wig.
and this is also where we get into the like, is Oppenheimer going to have a like historic night instead of just a, you know, a romp? Like it looks like it's definitely going to have a romp, but is it going to be historic? It's got 13 nominations. We've already said it's pretty definitive. It's not going to win supporting actress. That would be a huge surprise if it picked up supporting actress. But that means it could win 12, which is more than the most has ever been. The most is 11. And that is, hold please, 3 movies, Ben-Hur, Titanic, and Return of the King. All got 11. It's not likely, but if it does pick up makeup, which doesn't seem, isn't like, you know, indicated by any of the precursors, but is there that much momentum that they are ready to say like, yeah, like just check the Oppenheimer box every time. If it wins makeup and a couple like makeup and hairstyling, as well as a couple of the other ones that we're going to talk about momentarily, then it's on, and it may be history.
Agreed. And I think there are a few opportunities for that. And it's one of those things, I don't quite know what the order of the broadcast is supposed to be, but if any of these categories come early on and they go to Oppenheimer, buckle up. Like we're in for a big night. PT, you want to read best costume design nominees?
I do. I would absolutely love to. The nominees for best costume design go to Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, Napoleon, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. So so this is another category that super hard to predict. No like super clear front runner. It's down to 2 movies. The aforementioned Poor Things, who has the aesthetic, got a lot of nominations and has a lot of positive will coming its way, and then Barbie, which we didn't say, but I kind of feel like should have been nominated in makeup and hairstyling, but whatever. That's it's nominated here, and I'll ask Antonio. Antonio, who do you think is going to win this toss-up race?
So I think this is going to go to Barbie. I agree, it's a toss-up. It was hard for me to pick between the two. I wouldn't be shocked if it was Poor Things, but the will win and should win for me is Barbie. I think that you had to nail the aesthetic. of the costumes in particular for this movie, and they absolutely did, right? Um, so you know, I don't know, but again, it's difficult for me. Um, what about so Jen? I think you have a different choice for the will win this, right?
I do. I do. So I have Poor Things winning this. And that's for two reasons. One is I'm committing to this narrative of we're gonna pretend like we like Barbie, but not actually give it any awards. So, and I really think, because I think Monday morning we're gonna have to relive the Barbie snubbing discourse all over again. That's my prediction. And I'm not looking forward to that. And I'm not looking forward to that being the headline coming out of the Oscars. But that's my gut. That's what my gut's telling me. And that's also there's precedent for it in a lot of the precursor awards. And so if I'm sticking with that consistent narrative, I can't be thinking about this category by category. I have to be thinking about this as a function of the larger context of this narrative. And so I can't really pick Barbie by that logic. The other thing is the costume design in Poor Things, and this is what makes it so tricky to predict this category in particular, because the guild precursors, so like the awards given by actual costume designers, have funky categories. Like they have subcategories, and Barbie was in like sometimes Barbie and Poor Things are in period, sometimes Poor Things in fantasy. Like it's just like it's all over the place in these craft categories. And so that's what makes it harder, because there's not like a one-to-one correlation for things that each of these films has won in the past. But I do think if we think about the types of costumes that the Academy likes to give this award to, period costumes by far and away are and it's one of those things where, like, if you have no idea what any of the nominees are, just pick the one with the puffy sleeves and you're good, right? Like the big skirts and the puffy sleeves, do it when you can. And so like, so while I think that the cool thing about Poor Things costume design is that it's kind of combining sort of a lot of Victorian styles with more modern silhouettes, right? Like we got the high-waisted short shorts with the huge puffy sleeves, right? Like so it's doing a lot of cool innovative things that kind of do check that sort of fantasy box. But at the end of the day, the foundation of a lot of those designs is in like the 19th century, and anything 17th to 19th century, the Academy is just going to eat up. It's like costume catnip. And so that's why I really think Poor Things can pull ahead of Barbie. The other thing too, and I've heard this so many places, that a lot of voters might feel like the costumes in Barbie were pre-existing, that the designs were pre-existing, because they're trying to imitate
Interesting.
the pre-existing styles from the actual Barbie doll lines. And then the counter argument is like, yes, but the costume designers had to work really hard to get them to look normal on human bodies. Like there's a lot of design work that actually goes into converting those and adapting those, but still like the inspiration for it is pre-existing and not. And whereas you can presume that a lot of the looks that Emma Stone has in Poor Things are sort of like completely from scratch designs, right? Like they're just from the imagination of the designer.
I love that all the everything you're saying that feels very accurate about the puffy sleeves, and go for that. None of that love was ever felt directed towards Napoleon. Like everyone was like, okay. What about the movie that actually people like, and that folks are in favor of? So all that love got directed to Poor Things. Yeah, I said I think that Barbie will win in the coin flip. I guess kind of in the opposite mindset of what you're saying, Jen, whereas I think that instead of being like, we don't want to give it any awards, is like, we want to give it some awards. Spoilers for what we're about to get to, but I think that this sort of, the artifice awards will like split between the two of them. And I think that this is the one that goes to Barbie, although I do love the idea, because it feels the idea that there's people that are like, this isn't even original, because that feels like just the right level of
Right.
kind of bitchiness that would play into Academy voting mindset, and be the sort of whisper campaign that might be enough to sway a close race like this. But I would like Poor Things to win, because I really love Barbie. I think Barbie's incredible. I think when Jen keeps saying they're not going to give an award to Barbie, she's forgetting the award Barbie seems to have fully locked up.
No, that's the one.
Which we'll get to. But right, that'll be one. Poor Things doesn't have that. Poor Things doesn't have one that's locked up yet. Like Poor Things is like a question mark all around. So I'm like, in terms of what I want to win, I would rather Barbie get the one award and Poor Things get, 3 technical awards than risk Poor Things never getting any of them.
Here's the other thing.
That's where I am on it.
It's just unfortunate timing that Barbie and Poor Things are coming out in the same year. Because any other year where they are separate, they are crushing all of these categories. You know what I mean? Like, and it's because they're both stories about women with like childlike qualities who are kind of doll-like and kind of learning about the world for the first time. Like, there's so many similarities in terms of like the stories of these movies. And because of that, one is populist and one is a little bit more art house. Mm-hmm. Academy's going to go for the latter. That's also contributing to my overarching theory about what's going to happen with Barbie. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it picks up more than I think it will. But that's the cynical motivation.
I think that's fair. Weren't we really close? Like, was this just sort of like the outside looking in? Didn't it feel like they were on the cusp of pushing Poor Things to 2024 because of the strikes?
Yeah, I think so.
Like, imagine if it were coming out like this fall, or even if it came out this spring, it would be fighting like Dune 2 for all these awards. And I think, might have, I don't know. I feel like it would have a clearer lane because it would be, those are much more different experiences than the sort of similarities that you're talking about.
There would also be more room for it above the Poor Things above the line because like there would be more of a split of like Poor Things takes more above the line. Maybe it gets director, maybe it gets screenplay, whereas Dune gets all these craft categories or something like that, right? Like there would be a more division of awarding. But yeah, Antonio, what do you think about all this?
I am taking sort of the opposite view on these categories, right? So you're taking as like a 0 Barbie, or 1 Barbie, and I think that it's gonna take multiple, right? So I have them on Will, and all of these sort of close calls. I have Barbie taking it, and this could very well would be my downfall, right? Like if I'm wrong on this, but if I'm right on this, then I'm gonna I think that you're right that it's one or the other. So like, looking ahead to like to production design, it's the same split, right? We're gonna have the same sort of debate, but I'm betting that enthusiasm for the movie is going to work for it, and is going to propel it to wins. But that being said, I would be thrilled to see Poor Things win as well.
All right, we ready for production design? The nominees are Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, Napoleon, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. So yeah, we're back here again.
I do want to note that like I feel like a real long time ago we were talking like in the fall we were looking down the road at Oscar nominations, and we did keep saying you're gonna hear Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things as like nominees in almost all the technical categories. And we were right. Like how smart were we for foreseeing that before we had seen two of the 3 movies. It was pretty clear for a while. So Jen, who do you think will win in this category?
So I have Poor Things again. And so here's the other thing is like, I know I've said enough about Barbie versus Poor Things, but the other thing in the favor of Poor Things is I think back to the BAFTAs where it surprised us in how many of these categories that it won. And I do feel like that a lot of people are saying that Poor Things is the number 2 favorite overall. And so I feel like general love for that film, general support for that film, it's that sort of like release valve problem of like it doesn't really have a place in a lot of the above line categories because of the competition, but it does have the opportunity to be here. And oftentimes the Academy, when they're kind of trying to spread the wealth, even if it's only a little bit, they'll be like, oh, okay, well, this is gonna get all the huge categories, all the acting and this, whatever, and then there's like one film that we really love. Oh wait, but we can give it all these technical categories, right? And that's where it will show our appreciation for it. And that's just the feeling I get with that's why I'm putting Poor Things again and again with these sort of craft categories, because I do think that's the way in which people will feel like they are able to express their love for the film, which supposedly is very strong across the board. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But I do feel like the biggest spoiler is actually not Barbie. Like a lot of people are saying, it's actually Oppenheimer, because this category historically, and I didn't have time to look up who the past winners were, so I don't know them off the top of my head as much as some of the other ones, but the Academy loves rewarding anytime people build stuff from the ground up. Now that does technically fit Poor Things does have a lot of built sets, but did they make an entire town like they did in Oppenheimer, right? You would say back when Killers of the Flower Moon still had some more juice, I was saying that this is a very strong contender in this category potentially, because they built the train station, they built the town, they built the village, they did all these things. And I think people don't realize that was all production design and not just like a location somewhere, which is the problem. Whereas Poor Things, it's very visible that these are made things because they are fantastical, right? But Oppenheimer is the spoiler, because if it has that big night that we're kind of thinking if it gets swept up, this is an easy category for people to just be like Oppenheimer all across the card, because they built Los Alamos, right? The set. So
could I hit you with the kind of predictor stat that I know you like, Jen? Since 2016, every winner in production design was at least nominated in sound, and the only one of these that was nominated in sound is Oppenheimer. So either the precedent will hold for what is that, the 8th year in a row, or the precedent will be broken. So that's just another thing to think about, which I think also kind of speaks to, since you said you hadn't looked it up, I just glanced at it, but All Quiet on the Western Front, Dune, Black Panther, Shape of Water, La La Land, Fury Road, Grand Budapest, these are movies that won 4, 5, 6 awards, a lot of them technical, a lot of sort of spreading out over multiple places. There's some other ones that you can tell maybe from the years I skipped over, Mank, and The Great Gatsby. I don't know how many The Great Gatsby won, but that this usually gets swept up in the big tech winners of the night. So it does feel possible, since I don't think Poor Things will get again, there's maybe a road where Poor Things could get 4 awards and is the second most awarded movie of the night. But if it seems very possible. The path is there for this to be swept up in the Oppenheimer wave, and this is one of the awards that gets it to 10.
Right. I didn't realize about that sound stat. But that makes total sense, because I'm like, oh yeah, All Quiet on the Western Front last year, which I feel like no one predicted in this category, right? So maybe this is because
I feel like that was one of the ones that people were kind of thinking that's where Elvis would get some love, because the Baz Luhrmann production design team had won a couple times, and people were like, well, everyone likes Elvis, so maybe, but it went to All Quiet instead.
Is there a precursor guild for production design?
There is.
Yeah.
What a great question. It's the Art Directors Guild and the Set Directors Society of America. And it, like in the ones that Jen were talking about, they have subcategories that make all of this confusing. So Oppenheimer won the Art Directors Guild in period film over Killers of the Flower Moon and Napoleon. But Barbie and Poor Things both competed in fantasy film, where Poor Things won. But then the Set Directors Guild put Barbie in fantasy and Poor Things in period, and then Poor Things beat Oppenheimer in the period. So it's this sort of weird circles of Oppenheimer hasn't beaten the other two. Poor Things has 2 wins against each of them, but not all of them combined. So what does that mean? We don't know. But basically, and then Barbie had the critics' choice and did win. It won on its own, not against the other two for the Set Directors Society. So it's like they all have some precursors, with Poor Things with the BAFTA leaning a little bit higher on the sort of pure numbers crunching of it. But yeah, basically it feels like the three of them haven't been in competition like this. So yeah, it could
get nuts.
It could get nuts. Yeah, we don't know. Antonio, what are your thoughts on all this?
So I don't know. Now I'm not sure. You're convincing me that maybe I've made a big mistake with all the Barbie wins, but I'm going to stick with Barbie. I mean, right? Again, for the reason I said, same reason before. I feel like if it's going to win below the line, if it's going to win below the line, it's going to win maybe, well, either one or a few, and so. Um, so again, I think I'm going to stick with it as a will win and should win, even though Poor Things, it's I think could take it. But Jen makes a compelling case for Oppenheimer too. It would be surprising if Oppenheimer took this one too.
I would feel like either, for me as a should win, either Barbie or Poor Things winning, incredible. They both look wonderful. I love the look of both of them. Again, like I would lean towards Poor Things because I want to make sure Poor Things gets some recognition. I Oppenheimer is just different because it's non-fantastical. It's trying to create a historical period. It did an amazing job of that. I won't be like super bummed, but the future discourse that Jen is talking about, I think it losing like these production ones, these design ones, costumes and sets will like really tip people over. So like if Barbie wins these two, it's possible that it's just like, well, at least they got something right. But I think if it loses these two, that's gonna push over people who think about it for more than 5 seconds, because they're gonna be like, but like it looked just like a Barbie's Dreamland. Like, what are we doing? Like, why are we even talking about this? The only movie I saw all year was clearly the best one.
I have Barbie as my should win for the reason you just said. I mean, I feel like did such an amazing job of just pulling us into Barbie land, and just the idea that like the fridge has a sticker on it, right? Like it's just genius. Like it's like
So
it
smart.
really is translating the experience of playing with Barbie as a toy to a visual medium. Like it's amazing. Like the milk just says cow's milk on it. Like it's just like like and yeah, so I actually like, I would love that. And so the other thing I will kind of throw in the mix is this category really loves creating an immersive world. So you mentioned Black Panther, right? Like as a previous winner, like there is sort of like fantasy or kind of sci-fi, like sci-fi generally favored in this category a lot of the time. So, but also historical drama. So like you're kind of talking me into Oppenheimer is maybe what I'm getting at. But the thing that's pulling me back is like, yeah, but like Barbie and Poor Things, regardless of which one you think is going to win over the other, both of those are creating these worlds that we can enter through the design. And so that's pretty strong and compelling. I don't know.
Don't forget Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Mank, and All Quiet on the Western Front are 3 of the last 4. So there have been that historical period component you're talking about, with Dune being the outlier of creating a whole different world. So yeah, it'll be interesting. This is one I maybe was overrating how much of a toss-up costume is compared to this one. They're both pretty tossy. It's not a word.
It's about to get even weirder because we're going to talk about visual effects now, which just from the get-go, it's a strange category because of the nominees. So Antonio, do you want to read those nominees for us?
I do. The nominees for visual effects are The Creator, Godzilla -1, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, and Napoleon. So why don't we start with PT? PT, what do you think will win this category, this strange category?
Antonio, I'm sorry, you didn't mention Poor Things, Oppenheimer, or Killers of the Flower Moon. So are we sure this is this year's Academy Awards? Are we confident about that? Yeah, this is a weird one because it does feel like there's a world where this is another fight between Oppenheimer and Poor Things, but neither got nominated. So they've both won precursors, but they're not here right now. So it feels to me like the narrative and our the will wins we have across the board supports that are sort of with two movies that are like, I can't believe they like, what was the budget? Like, how did they get those effects from just that amount of money? And that's The Creator and Godzilla Minus One. This is where I and all due respect to the Creator, a movie I had a very good time with and I thought had amazing visual effects, and I'm really glad it got nominated and looks to be currently the front runner. But I'm going to do the opposite of hope dicting. I'm doom dicting here that The Creator will win over Godzilla Minus One, even though I want Godzilla Minus One to win so bad because I thought that movie was incredible and the effects look so good and they've spent like $10 on it. That's not accurate. It was more than that, but I think it's only like a $15 million budget. And they did a really good Godzilla and had like all these other things happen in the movie, special effects wise, that held up really well. So I would love that to win, but The Creator also, creating this whole world. It's not a sequel, and it's not Napoleon. Which, all due respect to Napoleon, it did look cool, but and that, I guess that would be fine if that won. It would be fifth on my list probably, but I feel like The Creator is just like, oh wow, interesting, like stuff we hadn't really seen before, or new twists on this type of sci-fi world. And yeah, I think did a lot with a little. It seems not as little as Godzilla Minus One, and not as good of a movie. But it's great. It's great that it's sort of these two scrappy films are fighting it out. Jen, what do you think? What do you think about will win and also should win?
So I do think it is a tough call to a certain degree, but having not seen Godzilla Minus One, I can be a little bit more objective and be like, anyone who's predicting Godzilla Minus One, sorry, Antonio, is just blinded by their love for that movie. And this is critics across the board are just like, let's do it. Godzilla Minus One, passion vote, yes. And it's like, that's not going to happen.
But what if the voters love the movie too, Jen? What if the voters also want to support it?
They might, but I think timing is a factor. I feel like this movie didn't really come out soon enough for it to build enough momentum by the time voting started. I do think that there hasn't, the Academy is getting more international. So on the one hand, that would be a point in its favor to be like, oh, it finally. But I feel like in this category in particular, that has not been true. That it has been a pretty Western American heavy winners. If I'm not, I mean, I could just be making that up, I guess. But the other thing too is that The Creator is the only one of these nominees that has actually won any precursors, like to any sort of significant degree. You know what I mean? Like I think, like a lot of people were like, oh, Napoleon feels like the most Oscar-y movie on here. Right. It's but at the same time, nobody liked that movie. And then the other thing was that but I'm hearing the same thing about The Creator is that like if you are just looking at the visual effects as the work itself and not thinking about it in the context of the movie, then it pulls ahead. But a lot of the counter argument for that is like, but nobody cares about the movie The Creator. But my rebuttal to that is like, but that doesn't really matter in this category. Like it historically has not mattered. Like there's not even a Best Picture nominee in this category right now. So clearly, like, that's not a concern when it comes to visual effects. It's like, I think visual effects out of all of the below the line categories is the one that people look at in a vacuum the most. And they don't care about like if they like the movie. So yeah, I don't know. But my should win actually, and this is just again me being weird, is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Even though I just heard Eric Anderson like audibly roll his eyes this morning when I was listening to Awards Watch, because he was like, well, you know who beat the Godzilla Minus One in the character category in whatever visual effects society or whatever. He's like, Rocket Raccoon. the raccoon beat Godzilla, and he was so mad about it. But I feel like that movie hinges on the humanoid animals looking believable. And because the story is so anchored in those characters, so like if like Rocket is talking to Lila and the effects look janky, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. The whole movie falls apart. And so like that's kind of my plug for that. I don't have any delusions of grandeur in terms of like, is it Oscar worthy? I don't know, but like
Can
that's
they,
just
can they
that's my
slide
defense.
Bradley Cooper's name into the visual effects for
Yeah,
it so he
let's do
can
it.
win his Oscar and everyone can be happy?
Yeah, let's backdoor Bradley Cooper's Oscar in this category, please.
Antonio, your thoughts on 5 movies, I'm sure all of which you watched and really enjoyed.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, I could be wrong, but I think that Godzilla minus one was a bigger surprise than the creator being in the category. Is
Yes,
that fair?
that is correct.
So
Yeah,
I think that the fact of it being here over all of these other movies, all these Best Picture nominees, is means that there is passionate support for it, so that there's like a base of people who will definitely vote for it. And I don't know. I think, I mean, again, I think Jen's logic is probably is right and is backed by like, but I think that the best movie of them for me just counts for something. So I think so. It's even though there are plenty of examples of like in this category in particular of where like the best movie itself, of course, didn't win, and I think she's right that there's a lot of tunnel vision when it comes to this. It's I don't know. It's just hard for me to get around all of the passion behind this movie in particular. So that's why I have it as the will win and win again, probably to my detriment.
well, 2 things I want to say. One, I want to echo what Antonio is saying as an overall message to the people who are hanging around. If you want to win your Oscar pool, you should be listening to Jen and not us,
Yeah.
because Jen plays the game better than we do, and we let our hearts get in the way too often, or yeah, we get what we want to see. Now that said, I'm looking at the last decade of visual effects, and like there aren't a lot of movies that I feel like people would be like, well, that's trash, but we liked the special effects, so it's fine. It's Interstellar. I mean, and not everyone likes this, but I'll go back a year for Gravity, Interstellar, Ex Machina, The Jungle Book. That's a question mark. Blade Runner 2049, First Man, 1917, Tenet, also a question mark. Dune, and Avatar: The Way of Water. So I mean, what fits better with those, the creator or Godzilla minus one?
I was gonna say, what genre do all of those belong in? Science fiction, which is the creator's more science fiction.
What do you
Godzilla
think
minus one.
Godzilla is, Jen? I mean,
I know, but like,
you know it's not a documentary, right? Like,
yes, I understand the giant lizard is not real. I understand that, but like, like, but you know what I mean? Like in terms of like a lot of the
the
movies
worlds.
the movies you listed are like hard sci-fi, dystopian sci-fi, right? They're not monster
Sure.
movies. Like, sorry.
Okay. Now, to clarify, you're not including First Man. You do believe we went to the moon. That's
still in
falling
space.
under sci-fi.
You know what I mean? I feel like from a
Okay, that's true.
visual
Good
effects
point.
from a visual effects perspective,
That's true.
First Man and Interstellar and Gravity, like there's a clear pattern. When people go into
Yes.
space, we want to give it a visual effects Oscar, right? Like
True.
that's
And there is
what I
space in
that's
the
what I took away
creator.
from that. Also, fun fact, this is great for Antonio. Naiad apparently beat out a bunch of these movies at one of the Guild Awards. I think it's the Visual Effects Society. Like it beat Napoleon, I think. PT's looking it
All
up
right.
I'm looking it up. Yeah, it's Napoleon's the only visual effects nominee with a corresponding production design nomination. And so people were saying, oh, maybe that's enough for it to get some momentum, but then it lost its Visual Effects Society category to Naiad because none of the water was real. They CGI'd all the water. No, it's true. They filmed it in a tank, but it didn't look right, so they CGI'd all the water to make it look more like an ocean.
Yeah. So the other thing you need to know about visual effects, the Guild, is that they have like a bake-off where all the nominees have to like make a presentation and show like a reel of like the behind the scenes stuff. And so apparently this is why Naiad won, is because anything that looked weird in Naiad, like the shark or like remember the punching of the shark, like
Yeah.
like that didn't look great. So they left that out, but but they just put all this, like, they showed the before and after of the water effects, and people were just like blown away. So
I'm so happy with how confidently Antonio just said he remembered something from Naiad. Besides Jodie Foster and Annette Bening's acting performance. Like, oh yeah, the shark, of course. Of course I remember the shark.
I do remember the visuals when Diana Nyad is like imagining stuff in the water. There's some stuff I remember that.
she's like
the
hallucinating.
magical mystery tour
Yes.
element underwater. Yeah. Okay, that's fair. Amazing.
Nyad's not winning any Oscars.
No. Although I will say with Antonio, I finished that movie and was like, if Jodie Foster wins, I have no problem with that. And that's partially because I've loved Jodie Foster my entire life, but I thought she was
I love Jodie Foster too. She was great in that movie.
Not as good as Da'Vine Joy Randolph, so I'm glad she's winning.
All right, so we're talking about acting. I think this is a sign we should move on to the next category.
You're right.
Best sound.
Okay. Best sound. The nominees are The Creator, Maestro, Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1, Oppenheimer, and The Zone of Interest. Antonio, I'm going to turn to you. What do you think about sound? Talk about your thoughts about will and should look pretty similar on your list. So why don't you talk about it?
You all have talked about this, all right, about zone of interest in particular, and how integral sound is to zone of interest, and it's for that reason. Like I know zone of interest is going to win elsewhere, so that could just be, it could win that award, and then that be it. But it just feels like a film. Like, how many films is sound that important, right? Like, it's incredibly important. And it's really done well, and it's really done effectively. Now, again, like, this is a category where the front runner is Oppenheimer, and voting against, predicting against Oppenheimer seems like foolish. But I'm just going to be foolish. I think this year, and say that the one that I think should win, zone of interest, I think will pull together, pull out a win here. But I know that the two of you disagree, at least on the will win. So but I think the precursor award here, I don't think that they went head to head. Is that right? Like Zone of Interest and Oppenheimer?
BAFTA was the only one where Zone of Interest won over Oppenheimer, I believe.
Okay.
Yes.
And that was significant. I remember people being like, "Whoa, okay,
yeah,
maybe it has a chance."
Yeah.
I know it's tough, and I think if there is an upset in this category, it's going to be Zone of Interest, and I will be delighted because that is my should win for all the things that Antonio just said, and like, it is so singular, and in terms of its execution, and like, Greg on our review talked a little bit about some of the behind the scenes stuff, incredible, and like, but I feel like it's incredible even just not the experience of the sound when you're watching the movie, even if you know nothing about how it was created or the thought that went behind it, that alone is enough to kind of like make me want it to win in this category. That's not to say that the sound in Oppenheimer isn't also impressive. I think that both films use quiet and silence, right? Like, if we think of the Trinity test in Oppenheimer, that like, I just remember when I first saw it in the theater, that moment where the bomb, I guess spoilers for Oppenheimer, I don't know, whatever. I don't know why I'm saying that now. Like,
spoilers for the 1940s.
Almost 2 hours into this. Yeah. Like, so when the bomb goes off and there's just silence and there's like that delay and it withholds the sound, is so incredibly powerful. And then like, yeah, and then just, yeah, everything in it is great. So I get why Oppenheimer would win, but I do think that what Zone of Interest does with sound is so different than any other movie I've ever seen, and so just so special that I feel like I would really want it to win. But I do think this is an easy thing that Oppenheimer's just gonna clean up.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, the Zone of Interest is just a hard movie to say things like, I'm excited about it, or it would be delightful if, because Zone of Interest is just such a heavy experience. But, I do think that there is some degree of narrative of, more people have been seeing it in the time between nominations and now. It's I don't believe available on home viewing yet, but it expanded into the theaters. And obviously, Academy voters get screeners and screenings that they can go to.
Greg said it's on VOD.
Oh, it is on VOD. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. But I could see there being kind of a drive, especially because it's a movie, and I guess I'm extrapolating out from my own experience, but this movie just keeps hanging around in my mind in a way that a lot of these other movies that I really, really like haven't, or not to the same degree. So, I do wonder if there is a chance that they might be like, sure, like it's kind of got a lock on one, like, but wouldn't it be, maybe we should give it two, and this is the space to do that. Like this is the one to give another little boost to Zone of Interest. But unlike that sort of Poor Things Barbie fight in the earlier technical ones where those two were kind of vying for it, this is up against the big kahuna. And so this is from my sort of back of the envelope math, this is sort of the not the midpoint, but this is the a tipping point in terms of how big a night Oppenheimer will have. Oppenheimer, I think, has 7 awards pretty locked up, and we're going to get to a few of those momentarily, and more were discussed in the last episode with Jen and Greg. But this is the one that would put it to 8, and suddenly it's like, okay, it's above everything everywhere. This is a really strong night, and then is it going to go like even further? And I ultimately think that Jen's right, that it is going to go in that direction. It's going to be so strong. The sound work at Oppenheimer is incredible, especially the sort of like beyond sort of the big nuclear test scene and elements, just the sort of the moments when we're in the main character's head and sort of seeing his perception and how the world like will change around him, that because there's no visual effects nomination for it, that really relies Academy voting wise on the sound and the ways in which the sound's manipulated to sort of show his perceptions and things. So I think it would be a totally worthy winner. I'm not going to be like mad about it, but I would absolutely, again, weird to say, I love the Zone of Interest and want it to be feted, but it really deserves this. Like this is a special execution of sounds in a way that very few movies have been able to do that. So that would be good. I know we're running late on things, but I do just want to add, I was looking at the Awards Watch website about the category, and they actually have Zone of Interest in 3rd for this category. Because it lost the award it could have gotten in the Motion Picture Sound Editors Guild to Society of the Snow, which is not nominated here. However, the movie that did win its Motion Picture Sound Editors is the one in 2nd place, and it's Maestro for the music.
I'm wrinkling my face. My face.
Somehow you are. Jen's face is wrinkled. I can confirm this. We're on video chat. So if you're looking for the long shot, if your desire for filling out an Oscar ballot is what's a plausible super long shot that no one sees coming, and you're just going to try to like shoot the moon with your choices, Maestro and sound, I guess, is the way to go.
That's a legit strategy in general. I don't condone predicting Maestro and sound, but yeah.
All right, what's next? I guess up next is best film editing. Jen, yes. Would you like to read the nominees?
The nominees are Anatomy of a Fall, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, Poor Things. Okay, so I guess I'll start this one just because I'm dying to say editing and sound often go together and are the same winner. Okay. I've been burned by this many times. See Sound of Metal in like 2018 or whatever it was. So anytime I've gone against the stat of sound and editing go together, I've been burned. And so I have Oppenheimer. If I'm doing Oppenheimer for sound, I have to do Oppenheimer for editing. And honestly, I think that the editing actually is a surer bet than sound. Maybe I'm spoiling a future category, but there are 3 technical artists in Oppenheimer that have been kind of touring the campaign trail together. And I think they're all pretty secure bets. We haven't talked about, one of them is Louis Göransson, which we talked about in the other episode. I think he's pretty much locked in. And so I think there's a third one that we're about to talk about in another category we haven't covered yet. But so I think that there's a trio of them that I think are pretty safe. And so it actually is more that like I'm pairing the sound prediction with Oppenheimer is the editing. But honestly, the editing is so next level in Oppenheimer because first of all, there's a lot of it. There's a lot of frenetic editing that works. That shouldn't work, but it works. And so much like editing to things that what is it? Like, what is that? Like a black hole? Is that like a ring around a planet? Like, what are we looking at? And it just very fluidly goes between extreme close-ups of Cillian Murphy's face and like really abstract physics things and back again. And it just works so well. So, and like in lesser hands, I think that doesn't work. So that's why I think Oppenheimer will win. I almost put it as my should win, but I actually put Anatomy of a Fall because honestly, that one scene where they have the audio, the recording of the fight, and then that one cut to rule them all. It was just so good. And I just think it's so I was so happy when it got nominated. I didn't think it actually I was unsure whether or not it would. So like if I'm doing an unconventional pick, it's that one. But Antonio, what's your
I think Oppenheimer will win. And I feel fairly certain of that. I love your Anatomy of a Fall pick for that moment, but I think also, again, because it's such a delicate balancing act to keep the audience guessing, that it actually does require a pretty deft hand. So, um, but I put my should win as Killers of the Flower Moon, which is not a title I've been saying a lot. And that's a little unfortunate, I think. But like, I think there's a freneticism about that movie too. Um, an energy and a propulsiveness that I think comes from really deft editing. Um, and so that's my should win. But you might have convinced me on Anatomy of Fall for the should win, but I there's no moving on the will win on this. PT, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I have Oppenheimer in both will and should. For all the reasons, the will for all the reasons you've both said, should for what Jen was talking about. It's actually strange that there's only been one Christopher Nolan movie to win editing up to this point. It was Dunkirk. But this is in many ways, and I don't think it's just because it feels like it's going to win all the awards or most of them coming up. But this does feel like a culmination of his career and like his sort of multiple timeline, his timey-wimey BS, I say with love, and sort of his way of finding sort of like making everything feel like it's a training montage for like a 3-hour movie. Like it just always feels like we're like jumping into like the next thing that happens. Is heavily controlled by the editing, and so I'm very confident with that. I love both of those picks. I think similar to Robert De Niro, I would love for Thelma Schoonmaker to get, I believe, a fourth win to cap her career in editing. She deserves it for Killers of the Flower Moon, and I think that movie has the propulsion, but it also has more moments when it kind of slows down that I think could get sort of too languid and too slow if it's not sort of handled really well. And the Anatomy of a Fall like pieces I think are great. I mean, and the other two movies, Holdovers and Poor Things, I also really like. I don't think of the editing immediately for either of them, but if one of them was sort of walking away with it, I would probably not be sad. But this feels like in a year of a steamroller, this is a completely valid win for the steamrolling movie Oppenheimer. Like I support that.
All right. Next up, we've got cinematography. Antonio, do the honors.
All right, the nominees are El Conde, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. Why don't we start with PT? Actually, you and I aligned. You and I have aligned a few times tonight. So here our will win and should win also aligned. So why don't you talk about what you think will win and should win?
Sure. I mean, this is the category I believe Jen was hinting at earlier of the three people who are out on the technical side. Ludwig Göransson for score, Jennifer Lame for editing, and well, of course, why did I set myself up for this? Hoyt von Hoytema for cinematography. As kind of a trio of Oppenheimies who are out, Oppenhomies, I guess is the actual term, who are out campaigning together and feel like they got things pretty locked down. The cinematography in this movie is incredible. I get it. I've got no problem with this. It's these huge sweeping vistas, but also these incredible close-ups of the actors' faces and what it captures. And I don't know if you guys have watched some of the behind the scenes stuff, but they're shooting a lot of times on the huge IMAX cameras, these 65, 70 millimeter film IMAX cameras. And they're just like right in like Emily Blunt's face or Cillian Murphy's face. And sometimes Christopher Nolan's on the side spitting things to make visual effects like in camera. Or they're when the wall shakes behind him, when he starts to like have sort of those moments, that's a projection of the wall onto itself, like a video projection, and someone's just tapping it to make it shake. So that would maybe be visual effects, but like the cinematography to capture all of that is amazing. This is another one. It's one of those 7 locks. It feels like for Oppenheimer, justifiably deserved. However, Antonio and I were like, no, we zag on this. We go with Rodrigo Prieto for Killers of the Flower Moon, because that movie's also beautiful and is just not winning as many awards. So I would, I love Oppenheimer, and I'm glad it's going to be this dominant force. I would love Oppenheimer to get like 2 or 3 fewer awards, so Killers of the Flower Moon gets a couple more and maybe one extra, somewhere else. Zone of interest and sound, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I think Killers of the Flower Moon similarly. Well, Antonio, why don't you talk about Killers of the Flower Moon cinematography for us?
Yeah, I mean the scene when the oil, like that is it's stuck in my head, and there's so many scenes too. That when the explosion scene, and that with the house, and the look, I'm not obviously I'm the least bullish on like Oppenheimer of any one of us, right? But even I like recognize like the technical achievements of that film, so I have no problem actually with it winning like all of these categories. Like I do think that the cinematography is amazing in Oppenheimer, but I don't know. A lot of this is just that it feels like Killers of the Flower Moon is a favorite in one category, right? And that's it. And that's all. But that's also a technical achievement too, an incredible right feat. So like PT, I would like to see it take home some things here, but it's not going to happen. It's all Oppenheimer, which brings us to Jen.
And the thing I'll add, because we haven't mentioned it yet, is just the vistas of New Mexico are something that this movie on paper doesn't necessarily seem like it needs. But but the cinematography makes you be like, oh yes, like this is a fundamental part of this movie, in terms of telling Oppenheimer's story. And so I think, and there's so much more. I mean, to the lighting with the Trinity test, right? How they lit Benny Safdie's with like sunscreen all over his face, and like it's little things like that too, that I think really are amazing. And so yeah, nothing more needs to be said.
It's true. Shout out to the cinematography branch for always keeping it a little weird and making sure there's some nomination, like El Conde,
Yeah,
which is a weird movie, not really a successful movie. That's a movie that it's directed by, and I'm stalling while I
Pablo
open the
Larraín.
page. Pablo Larraín, thank you, who did Spencer and Jackie. And I think there's another in that sort of trio of movies that were Neruda is the one I'm thinking of, who is Chilean, and this is a Chilean movie. When it was announced, it was sort of presumed as this will be a big player in international. I think people didn't really like it. It's a vampire story. Augusto Pinochet is a vampire, and that's why he was so evil and also lived for so long. So it doesn't really work that well, but it does look incredible. So full respect to the cinematography branch for keeping it real with wacky nominees and getting those movies in with just the one nominee in this.
They do it every year.
Love it.
All right, original song.
The nominees in Best Original Song are "The Fire Inside" from the movie Flamin' Hot, music and lyrics by Diane Warren. I won't do the music and lyrics for all of them, but we needed to make sure Diane Warren was recognized. I'm Just Ken from Barbie. I will do it. Music and lyric by Mark Ronson and Andrew Wyatt. It Never Went Away from American Symphony. Music and lyric by Jean-Baptiste and Dan Wilson. Oh boy,
Wajaje?
Wasaji? Yeah,
Wajaje.
Wajaje. A Song for My People from Killers of the Flower Moon. Music and lyric by Scott George. And What Was I Made For from Barbie. Music and lyric by Billie Eilish and Phineas O'Connell. Can we just say that, like, every single precursor has gone to What Was I Made For, including multiple Grammys that are separate from the Oscar experience? It's one of the rare times that one of the Oscar nomination movies is a crossover smash to the degree that it's getting Grammy Awards outside for original song, not just like, movie categories. So
Billie Eilish will be winning her second Oscar at the age of 20 something.
22.
Right? 22.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I suddenly feel so inadequate.
Still funny, and I know I've said this before, but so sorry for repeat listeners, but I think it's only been like 7 years since my friend was like, my neighbor's kid makes music. And I was like, okay. It's like, yeah, and she's pretty good. And I'm like, sure. And then like within like a year or two, she was playing the Forum, and now she's going to have won 2 Oscars. And it's a great song. So, no problem here. Although we all have the same should win. Antonio, why don't you share our should win?
I mean, I'm actually not a huge a Billie Eilish fan. I don't really like music that much, but I do like the song. Like I like of her songs, this is one of my favorite, and it's integral to the movie. Like I feel like often the original songs happen just like in the credits at the end, right? Whereas this happened in the context of the movie and is important to the movie, like important to the meaning of the movie, and it comes at an integral point in the movie. But I think bonus points to I'm Just Ken for like being like sung in the movie, right?
Mhm.
And like this is even more integrated into the movie. Like you could imagine another song being played during that moment in Barbie, but I'm Just Ken has to be I'm Just Ken. um, so so I think the degree of difficulty, and it's funny. Um, so for the same reason why I think Gosling should win, I just think it's kind of ingenious and catchy, and so I would be thrilled, and I do think that it's possible that it could, despite all the precursors, but it's going to Billie Eilish, but I think it should go I'm Just Ken. Why did you all choose this as your should?
So I'm of the belief that end credits movies shouldn't count in this category.
Yeah.
I think there's like a weird arms race that happens with movies trying to get famous musical artists just to do an end credit song that really has nothing to do with the movie itself. I mean, the theme may barring some thematic ties or something like that. You know what I mean? But and also like What Was I Made For, while a great song that I enjoy, and actually like, is in a lot of ways is the ethos of Barbie condensed into one song, right? So I get it, but it also is just like the most Oscar-y Oscar song that is so in line with the sort of like lyrical ballad type song, like Oscar, the Academy loves a good political anthem or rousing anthem, and they love a good sort of lyrical, contemplative, quiet, profound song. And so like, this is, to me, this seems like so stereotypically Oscar. But I'm Just Ken, yeah, you're right, it's in the movie, it's really catchy, it showcases Ryan Gosling, and, Mark Ronson, when he talks about this song, says he styled it, he was inspired by prog rock because that is the genre and the era of music where he felt like male artists were at their most vulnerable. And so it fit the character, right? And I just feel like that's just so thoughtful. And like, it's not just like a catchy song that he came up with on the fly, right? It actually, he thought about sort of how the musicality of it would tie in with what the movie was trying to do. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think it's great. I actually really like the Dua Lipa song too that did not get nominated.
Yeah,
But I understand that like that's the one I actually probably listen to the most, just like in my car and stuff like that. My kids like it. They dance to it. But I get that we didn't need 3 Barbie songs in this category.
Well, I mean, are we sure? Are we sure we didn't?
I thought that there was a limit. I thought that they imposed a limit on the number of songs
Yeah,
that could
there
be from the
wasn't
same
going to be
movie,
more
right?
than Yeah,
Yeah.
no more than 2 songs from a movie
Oh,
can get
interesting. I
nominated
don't know
here.
if I
Yeah.
realized that. Did La La Land have 3? Am I remembering that? Am I crazy, or did that only have 2?
I think it
Um,
only had 2.
okay. I didn't know how recent the rule was, I guess. The reports I've heard from the people in my life who listen to like top 40 radio are that both What Was I Made For and Dance the Night Away are played pretty regularly, which, again, maybe it would be is a point in both of their favors. Here's the narrative that I'm going to put out there. I don't know if it fully exists, but it feels like this could form if things go a certain way or not. Is that What Was I Made For is the song about the like women empowerment, feminist, like self-realization part of Barbie, and I'm Just Ken is the goofy, like jokey part of Barbie, and that people will be mad if the jokey part wins over the serious part.
Interesting.
And so that's maybe why there hasn't even really been a push, for all the reasons we're all saying we love I Love Ken as a song, as a piece of the movie, but that like, given the already sort of shaky things, because Antonio was like, oh, it's so good, and Ryan Gosling's so good at performing it. It's like, yeah, this is a way to sort of acknowledge him. If he can't win supporting actor, give him this song too. But then is that all just reinforcing the like, Barbie, we loved it, especially the men. Like the men were really the good part of Barbie. So we're gonna give their song the win and nominate the male actor, etc.
Also,
So
the Academy just doesn't choose comedy songs. Justice for Husafik.
yes.
I love it.
And Justice for My should have been nominated for this, which is the Camp Isn't Home from Theater Camp,
Oh yeah,
which should have made it into this,
that would have been great.
but was never going to. But yeah, I mean, I think that I'm Just Ken's wonderful. Jen, I'm so glad you said that. I have texted some of my music loving friends multiple times when I've heard the song, that I'm Just Ken is Prague, and so I'm glad to hear that that's not just me viewing it as that, but
Confirmed
that was
by Mark
intentional.
Ronson.
Confirmed. Amazing. So yeah, I think that's incredible. I would also low key love if the Killers of the Flower Moon song won. Like, I think that would be great, because of sort of what it would represent, and also that Killers of the Flower Moon would get an additional award or one award in some instance. So I do wonder if this is not actually possible, because What Was I Made For is just barreling through like a little mini Oppenheimer in just this category. But if there was some sort of, the Barbie songs might cancel each other out, and this one will step forward, part of me would absolutely love it if in the end, after all of this, after everything and all the Barbie discourse and everything else, if Diane Warren wins for the flaming hot song. And this is the year when everyone's finally like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And Barbie is actually empty handed and everyone loses their gosh darn minds.
I don't even think I'm gonna go that far. PT, just because I promised it at the top of the show, can you give us the like 2-minute version of why is Diane Warren a thing?
Oh wow. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do this off the dome, because I don't
You don't
I
need
don't know
all
if I
the
can pull
stats. Just explain sort of like
my
why
notes. It's that she's been nominated a bunch. She's been writing songs since the 80s. She did the song from the Mannequin movie in like 1986 or 7 and lost to the Dirty Dancing song. Like, she co-wrote that. That was one of like her first or second nomination. And it's like, oh yeah, that's like a famous song. That could be good. And then like she was a consistent songwriter for a while, and then because the branches nominate their own handle the nominations themselves, there are enough songwriters that just look up to her, and she's sort of the Susan Lucci of this category, and she just writes songs that are all kind of these like mid-tempo ballads like that are the same, and she's been nominated for like 15 of the last 16 or 17 years, and they finally gave her a Lifetime Achievement Award to be like, Diane, you're doing incredible, like, here, you have an Oscar now. And the songwriting guilds or the songwriting branch is just like, no, we still need to nominate her. We keep doing it. And so for these last 2 years, she's still been nominated.
Mhm.
And it's almost always for a movie that no one's heard of, or
Yeah.
no one's considering as a possible candidate. Like, she had 2 this year, right? Didn't she co-write the 80 for Brady song that Dolly Parton sang? So people thought that was going to be it. Then suddenly Flamin' Hot showed up, and whatever. There's just going to be a Diane Warren song. So yeah, I mean, assume a Diane Warren nomination for the foreseeable future, and then the rest of the Academy will be like, why is this song here? Like, what is happening? And we're not voting for it. So there have been a couple of close calls. I do remember when I was looking into it, it was the sort of like one of those ones in like the 90s, maybe early 90s could have won. And then the last time where it feels like, why didn't we just end her misery, was the year that Spectre won the Sam Smith song from James Bond, which is not even the best title song written for the movie Spectre, because Radiohead wrote a song that was rejected and it was better than that. But she was nominated for a movie she co-wrote with Lady Gaga for a documentary, and they didn't win. And like, it feels like that could have been the time. So we're stuck. We are collectively stuck in this limbo, this liminal space of constant Diane Warren nominations,
Yep.
and then ultimate disappointment. So what if she just broke through this year and knocked off Barbie? Because everyone's like, well, everyone else is voting for Billie Eilish. I'll throw a vote for Diane. Like, she's earned it. And then somehow she ends up with a plurality.
Well, regardless of whatever happens, at least we know we are getting Ryan Gosling singing "I'm Just Ken" at the ceremony, so we can hang on to that.
Yeah.
Yes,
True.
I'm very excited. All right, we got to go to Best Picture, and I want to sort of give us a very focused lens through which to talk about Best Picture, not just because we're running overtime, but because that is part of it, though. But because Greg and I sort of already talked about it more generally on the last episode. Obviously, I want to hear your thoughts as well, but I think we've been kind of dancing around it. Let's finally get to it. How big a night is Oppenheimer having?
I think it gets to 10. I'm shooting that shot. I think it gets 10 wins. I have to figure out. So I think it gets sound. And then I think it's gonna grab a couple that we're not expecting. It's gonna get one of the like production.
You think it's gonna get screenplay?
And it's going to get screenplay.
Oh.
That's what I think. I don't know. Again, I'm just shooting a shot. This is not, don't use this for your Oscar ballots. I think the 8 is safe. And I kind of hope it's spreading around when we get to the day when we're all taking a photo of our filled out Oscar ballot. I will likely have 8 instead of 10, but since you asked right now, I think it gets 10 because I think it will be a big momentum.
I have 6 start on my list. I have supporting actor, best picture, director, score, editing, cinematography. Actor is probably also on there, which I think is how you get to 7, right?
Yeah, I'm assuming Cillian.
Yeah. I mean, there's Paul Giamatti upset potential, but like not really. But yeah, I don't know. Antonio, what do you think? Like how historic or record breaking is Oppenheimer gonna pull?
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if it was 10, honestly. But I think that PP's right that it's a safe 7. Which you said Everything Everywhere was 7, right? Last year?
Yeah.
Yes. It feels like it should be more than that, though,
Yeah.
to be honest, right? So I think it will. I think you're right. Probably will be 8, maybe more. Yeah, maybe up to 10. Yeah.
The last time there was a movie that won Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor and Director and Picture is Ben-Hur from 1959.
Oh, yeah. You quizzed me on
which
this,
again is one of the 3 movies that won 11 awards. The Best Years of Our Lives and Going My Way are the other 2 that won those 4. So even if it doesn't get beyond sort of the 7, it feels like a lock for. And or 6, it's a lock for, and then Cillian locks in number 7. It's a historic night. It'll only be the 4th movie that does that. And is already up there with some very successful Academy Award movies.
Can I quickly, because as we've been talking for these many hours, I have been trying to take notes about like I mentioned my unifying theory of the Oscars for this year, of like Oppenheimer takes these like 7 to 10 awards, and then we give one to each of the other major Best Picture nominees. And so I mapped it out. I'll show you my notes.
Charlie Day. Here it is. Okay.
Yes, it's happening. So I have, this is my like one each sort of list that could be happening. Maestro for hair and makeup, Barbie for song, American Fiction for adapted screenplay, Holdovers for supporting actress, the Killers of the Flower Moon for actress, Zone of Interest for international feature, Anatomy of a Fall for original screenplay. Past Lives, unfortunately, with nothing. I couldn't figure that one out.
Yeah, I mean, that's
There
right.
just wasn't. There weren't enough
What about
categories.
did you say Poor Things?
And then Poor Things, I have.
sorry.
I think Poor Things I have down for 2.
Okay.
Because that's the one in second place after Oppenheimer. So that was sort of my rationale. Like, and then
that's costume and production.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's my kind of like, this is how we're going to spread the wealth to all the other Best Picture, and then everyone is, the maximum number is 1 with the exception of Poor Things.
I mean, I'd be super happy with that as the outcome, because again, this was a good year, and I want all of those movies except Maestro to win. But Maestro's fine. Again, we've said it earlier. I'll say it again, that like in a normal year, Maestro is mid-table, kind of just filler where it's like inoffensive. It's just the fact that it's the weakest in a super strong year makes it the one that like I keep going to kick. But great. I would love all of those movies to be Academy Award winning, and they all feel like they fit in those. So I would be okay with that. Though I do wonder if some movie the last few years there has been kind of a second place like winner that gets multiple like 3 or 4. And I wonder if Oppenheimer eats away at the edges of some of those and gets beyond its 8. But I don't know. Antonio, what do you think about Jen's theory?
Yeah, I love the theory. I think it's entirely plausible, but I think it's even more likely that Oppenheimer eats more.
Yeah.
Right? And that we'll have more empty-handed. Yeah.
Then I gotta shuffle the Poor Things wins somewhere else. I think, if that happens, right? Or I guess maybe it's just costume.
What if Poor Things and Past Lives are the 2 that actually end up with nothing?
That would be crazy.
It would be. And then Barbie would probably get a second, or Oppenheimer takes production and costume somehow. I mean, it could. Yeah. Again, that's the like, if Oppenheimer picks up, or probably early in the night, one of costume, makeup, or production design, it's on. Like, it's just the get the broom. The sweep is happening. Like it's happening. So I think that's that's something to look out for. Jen, is this grand theory? Is this your hope, or is this what you think you're gonna like actually lock in as the prediction?
Yeah, this is a purely predictions oriented calculation. Because I feel like in such a strong year where we have such a great Best Picture 10 asterisk next to Maestro, now we got to commit to the bit. I think it's just the thing. That it would be unlikely for it to be kind of uneven, you know what I mean? Like, and so I feel like maybe it won't be this neat of like exactly 1 for each of these, but I feel like that's a pretty good like that's setting me up to not be failing horribly. The thing I always want to do when I finish going category by category is to zoom out and be like, okay, do these make sense together? Right? Not just like category by category, who's the best in the category, but like, is there a narrative that's kind of like explaining why the breakdown is this way? Or is there just like, in the year where Best Picture seems so non-controversial, this makes the most sense to me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because in any other year where Best Picture is less certain, I am trying to add up all the categories and all the winners to be like, what's the path to Best Picture? That's a phrase pundits use all the time. Does it have a path to Best Picture? Well, that's like a no-brainer with Oppenheimer, right? It's
a path out of Best Picture now.
Yeah, exactly. So then the question becomes, okay, if Oppenheimer's Best Picture path is so clear and it has like a certain set number of set number of wins kind of already in the bag, then what does that mean for the rest of these movies, right? And this was kind of the best that I came up with, where like it's a good compromise of like in each individual category, like Maestro makes sense for hair and makeup, Barbie seems good for song, right? Like all of these individually make sense, but also like as a broader picture kind of makes sense in terms of like how voters might think in terms of, yes, I want to check off Oppenheimer for most things, but also I don't want to forget about this or this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. And I feel like if the Academy Award results were done like critics groups where it's like a big group of people in a large room, like just talking it out. This could have been how it got hashed, like would be this way. And yeah, I mean, I think it's logical as a sort of a prediction submission or, you know, collection of predictions. But I will say, like, I am now like hope casting into reality, because I would love for
right, you want
I
to
would love
spread
that to be
around.
the outcome. Yeah.
So the thing I haven't considered, which I want to ask both of you, and then maybe this is where we wrap up, is like, what to you is the most likely surprise of the evening? Because that's the other thing I haven't considered and haven't factored into my predictions, is like, what is the thing I don't see coming right now? Because there's always, like, if every pundit is in lockstep and predicting the same things, there's going to inevitably statistically be places where we're wrong, right? So where are we wrong?
I'm gonna say, like, this isn't the only way, but like one way in which we might be wrong is we may be underestimating Oppenheimer. Like, we've sort of already said it.
Yes.
And kind of, you know, to Antonio's point of like that he said with some degree of like a sigh in his voice, like, I think it's just gonna get more. That like it's possible some of these ones where we're like, is it Barbie or is it Poor Things in the technical awards? That's actually Oppenheimer. Like, that's where it's going. And so it does end up getting to 10, 11, even maybe 12. It's possible. Everything but Emily Blunt in supporting actress, it theoretically could win. And then it could be the most awarded movie of all time. So maybe we're not seeing that it's that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I wouldn't call that likely, but like, I think there's a path to that. And then there's a path to sort of any of these ones. Like, I was mostly joking about the Diane Warren upset, but I do think it's possible that like there are some of these categories that have overwhelming favorites where people are like, I'll throw a vote this other way. Like, does that mean like a Jodie Foster beats Davine? Like, I don't think it's likely, but like that's where it could be, is like something where you're like Downey Jr., Davine, maybe Oppenheimer, score, cinematography, something like that, where it's just sort of like, that's locked. Like, I don't have to think about that there may be an upset in one of those.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's possible. I think it's still possible that Paul Giamatti wins Best Actor, and I don't know if that's so much of a surprise because they've been sort of like neck and neck for most of the season, um, but but he's a beloved actor. He's been acting a long time. His speeches have been great, as you and Greg pointed out, right? Like, his campaign is better. Cillian Murphy's, as you said, his speeches have been kind of underwhelming. So, and it's a very like American movie and a very like American character. Um, so, so I could see that happening. I think what PT is saying, like Oppenheimer has the historic night, right? Is more likely than that, though. How about you, Jen? What's the thing that you're worried about most on your ballot?
Historically, screenplay categories mess me up a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, those are
So I feel like something like a Past Lives and screenplay, or maybe it's Oppenheimer and adapted, right? Like something like that like is not
good.
part of, not even the number two. That's usually the big surprise, right? It's like a lot of these we've talked about have been between two, and it's like a coin toss, or like, which one do you think is going to beat the other one? But like, I think the biggest surprise probably would be like from a number 3 or number 4
Right.
ranked prediction to just pull ahead and take it, right? So like, even holdovers in original screenplay probably would be surprised, like would be enough of a surprise that people would be like, what?
Here's what I'll say. When I was watching the movie Maestro, I was texting Antonio because Jen, you had not seen it, and Greg had rated it higher on Letterboxd than Antonio did, and it was also late on the West Coast, or late enough on the West Coast. I didn't want to bother him, but I was texting Antonio, being like, I don't know about this movie. And one of the things I said was the movie that I would be like the Oscar I would be the least upset if it won for Bradley Cooper compared to the other movies that are out there is the one it least deserves. And that's Best Original Screenplay. Is it possible that they think that's the way to get Bradley Cooper an Oscar?
Don't
That's
put
the way
that
to
in the
reward
world.
Maestro. You asked for something crazy, but
right.
I feel like looking at the 10 screenplays, that feels like the one of like, well, that one can't win, but like that could be the path. Is the like, I don't know. Maestro was fine, like, and it was interesting. It made these choices, and also like Bradley really wants it. So like, he can't win actor, he can't win director. He's not going to win
Right.
feature, whatever. Like we can throw it over there, which
Right.
again, would be unfortunate because the other 4 movies are all much better, and I would like to see any of them win instead. But what if, like again, I think that's just to speak to. I think any of the screenplays could win this year, and there would be in retrospect a clear kind of narrative building of, oh, May December got no other nominations. People liked it. They wanted to reward
Right.
it. Past Lives, similar. Like it's not going to win Best Picture. Blah. Holdovers. Everyone realized actually we really like this, but it's only going to get 1 award. It should actually win 2. It was a really touching story. Zone of Interest, very different from the book. Like it was so like sparse and moving. Poor Things also changed a lot from the book. Maybe that's where some of that energy goes. And then we've talked about all the other ones as likely contenders. So I feel like yeah, the screenplay is a good place to look for an upset.
And the last thing I'll say is the thing that we haven't really talked about in the broader sense is Anatomy of a Fall and Zone of Interest have been surprising all season from the get-go. And they are the 2 most international films on the list. And so I feel like if there is going to be a, oh, what surprise, it might be like Sandra Hüller, an actress, or like, Zone of Interest in Sound, or, even like, this is never going to happen, but Justine Triet and director, right? Like I feel like that those are maybe the pockets where those 2 are nominated, and like it's like, oh, no chance. That might be a good upset, a fun upset.
Man. I mean,
wouldn't that be
the
crazy?
real hardcore Nolan bros reacting to him losing to a French woman would be
Oh no.
amazing.
Yeah, that's like the least likely, but I feel like there's something I'm not, because earlier in the episode I said, well, this original screenplay is the only place to put Anatomy, right? But like maybe there are other places I'm not seeing where it could
Sandra
go.
Hüller could.
Maybe it gets a weird editing win or something. You know what I mean? like weird things have happened. So
I mean, it's also worth remembering that last year again had the big winner, and then the small winner, the small one, All Quiet on the Western Front won 4, which meant a bunch of really good movies didn't get, Banshees, Tar, Fablemans, went home empty-handed, and so, it's possible that what ends up happening is there's another like 3, 4, 5 movies that we really like this year that don't get it.
yeah.
And whether is that because more Oppenheimer? Is it because maybe Barbie or Poor Things picks up a few more technical awards? Yeah, I don't know, but it will be interesting. And
Yeah.
again, I love 2 things. I love is the possibility of Oppenheimer stumbling in some way, and then people being like, how could they drop the ball? They fumbled at the goal line. The Academy Awards could have been relevant by giving it to this huge blockbuster movie, and instead, Anatomy of a Fall won something or whatever. And then I also love that Oppenheimer could win like 9 or 10 Oscars, and the Academy on Monday could be like, everyone happy? We gave it to like a $500 million blockbuster, and the greater cultural response is, well, Barbie really got shafted. Like the movie we cared about didn't get enough. And the Academy's like, what? But we
did the
and
thing
it's
that
just
you wanted, right?
thought,
No, yeah. All right. Well, either way, the surprises are what make Oscar Sunday so fun and so exciting. So I'm really looking forward to what I'm sure are a flurry of text messages that will be exchanged during the ceremony and the broadcast. So Antonio, this has been such an amazing culmination of a great season. Thank you for being here whenever we need you for and hopefully we haven't scared you away enough that we can do this all over again next season. But where can folks find you?
You can find me on Letterboxd at A Elefano. PT, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on Letterboxd at PT McNiff, PTMCNIFF. You can find me on other social medias under the same handle, doing almost nothing. So find me on Letterboxd instead. And you can follow, once again, the show on Instagram and Threads at The Long Take Review. You can email us at thelongtakereview@gmail.com. And you can find us on Letterboxd. You can find the show on Letterboxd. LTR Pod is the name of the account. Jen, where can everyone find you and your work?
You can find me at Sopchockchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI on Instagram and Threads, and Qui-Gon Jen on Letterboxd. You can also find my written reviews along with our podcast on the longtake.substack.com. Let's hope that we can all hear the music on Sunday and our predictions come to some sort of fruition. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. You can follow The Long Take Review on Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. Subscribe for free to receive new podcast episodes as well as written reviews of films with Oscar buzz and new films and series from pop franchises like Star Wars and Marvel.